Good morning, members. The first item on the agenda today is notification of Chair and Vice Chair. And on 19th of July 2026, full council appointed Councillor Alex Beckett as the Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee for the municipal year, and Councillor Robin Wyatt as the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Nick. And it is good to see everyone again for this new municipal year of the County Council. So I'd like to start by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today, either in person or online, for this meeting of the Highways and Transport Committee on the 30th of June 2026. This meeting is being held at Newshire Hall in Alconbury. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, but I could please request that everybody that does have their phones, please make sure it's on silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place. I would remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be placed on the County Council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and external doors and gather at the assembly point in the car park. Now, before we go any further, I would like to take this opportunity to announce our new Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, Graham Kane. Graham joins us for North Northants, but thank you very much for joining us, Graham. It's really good to have you here. Now, before we go any further, would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Galbraith, and Councillor Wells is here as a sub, and Councillor Goldsack with Councillor Keane as a sub.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interests? I see none. Thank you. Right, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the last committee meeting, which was held on the 5th of May 2026 as a correct record. Can I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of the minutes? I see nobody. On that basis, I will approve the minutes. I'll do that in just a second. Do officers or members have any comments on the action log? Yes, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I must apologise. This is my first Highways Committee meeting, so I'm slightly behind on what the ongoings are regarding the actions. So I do have a couple of questions, if I may. So the first one is on the street works action. When will members receive the live street manager data access, or is it a prototype dashboard?
Jamie. Over to David Hallett, our Service Director for Infrastructure and Project Delivery.
Yeah, just to confirm that in terms of book plan street works, it's all accessible on the One Network tool, which members and members of the public can all see and use.
Thank you. And the on the LHI scoring, will the full scoring list due by mid-July include unsuccessful schemes and reasons by division, if possible?
I think I can answer that one to say that yes, we always bring the full scoring matrices to this, which shows which schemes were successful.
Thank you, Chair. And lastly, on the safety and asset quality, will the July briefing include slips, trips, falls on pavements, not just carriageway incidents?
Sorry, thank you for the question. It wouldn't include that.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Sorry, could you repeat?
So it wouldn't include that, no.
Thank you. Could I just ask, is there a reason? Is that something that we don't log, or what's the reason for that? Thank you.
We don't capture that data. So the data that we have on road safety comes from the police. Capturing and understanding slips, trips and falls, it's something that we don't receive that data. It's difficult for us to consistently to capture it. The road safety team is working, for example, with hospitals and with the Vision Zero partnership to try and understand how we might get it in future, but presently we just don't have that data set.
Yeah, I can just add to that. That's been raised a few times, Councillor. And it is the trauma network is the best chance that we have to be able to do that. So that's what we're investigating, but the data doesn't come to us in a kind of normal format as part of road safety.
Thank you, Chair. That brings me kind of up to date with what I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Does anyone else have any questions on the action log? I see none. Brilliant. We've received 3 public questions for today's meeting, 2 of which relate to agenda item 7, which is the procurement of the term service contract for highways and transport, and 1 of which is related to agenda item 8, and that's the Humphreys Way A10 update. The questions will be presented when we reach those items. We received a further public question in relation to agenda item 6, delivery of the busway safety works, but the questioner is unable to attend the meeting to present the question, and therefore they will receive a written response. 2 petitions will be presented today, one related to agenda item 7, which is the term service contract, and one of which is not related to today's agenda. The former will be heard when we reach that item, but for now, I would like to invite Alex Sage to present the other petition, which was signed by 207 people to the committee. So, Alex, do you want to come up? So, welcome to the Highways and Transport Committee, Mr. Sage. If you want to press the button in the middle, that's how you make it go ahead. You have 3 minutes, I believe it is, to present your petition. So if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. For those that don't know, I'm Alex Sage. I'm the City Councillor for Castle Ward in Cambridge City. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear the petition and for the considered officer response to it. We are petitioning the County Council to stopping traffic cutting through residential areas to avoid the traffic lights at Huntington Road Junction in Castle Ward. This problem has been worsening and will continue to do so with the increased development in northwest Cambridge. 2 routes that are used as cut-throughs are the Oxford and Windsor Road route and the Benson and Canterbury Street route. For Oxford and Windsor Road, the volume of traffic is endangering children, pedestrians and cyclists. This is due to the increased traffic around the Oxford-Windsor Road Junction and Mayfield Primary School, as well as cars speeding up Oxford Road, which has on-road parking and is also a CAM cycle route. This summer, works are due to start on the Oxford-Windsor Road Junction, implementing a raised table and other traffic calming measures, which will help with the safety of the junction. However, this does not address the whole issue. Measures are needed to address the dangerous speeding up Oxford Road, not just the junction itself, and the loss of signage for the cycle route and poor signage for HGVs, the school and the speed limit. There are also currently regular repairs needed to the pinch point on Windsor Road and the drain cover at the centre of Oxford Road and other highway maintenance repairs that are extra costs incurred by this extra traffic. For Benson and Canterbury Street, traffic is cutting through their narrow streets where they have no front gardens. And this is especially dangerous with HGVs, which also block prams from exiting front doors when they get stuck there, which happens occasionally, and damaged curbs, cars and property. Local highways improvements have been implemented, which included road narrowing and priority give way features to discourage larger vehicles and reduce through traffic. Yet the issue with HGVs using the road persists, so further measures are needed. An encouraging next step would see resident engagement at the forefront of recognising the issue of traffic cutting through these neighbourhoods and potential solutions. So I hope to see this soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, David Allett, I believe you have a response to the petition.
Yep. Thanks for taking the time to submit the petition and for sharing your concerns. We fully recognise the issues that you've raised, particularly around road safety, air quality, and the impact of increasing through traffic on residential streets. And we appreciate the strength of feeling about this issue. We've carefully considered the proposal to introduce camera enforcement at Windsor Road, allowing access for residents and their visitors via a permit system. And whilst we understand the intention behind that suggestion, there are some significant practical and operational challenges that make this approach very difficult for us to deliver at the present time. To operate a system like this, we would need to create and maintain a list of all authorised vehicles, which would involve contacting every household in advance to collect vehicle details, a bit like introducing a new residence parking scheme, but on a much larger and more complex scale. Unlike parking permits, we would need details for all vehicles passing through the restriction, not just those choosing to park. Maintaining this list would also require ongoing work as residents move home, change vehicles or have visitors, and experience elsewhere suggests that keeping such lists fully up to date can be really challenging, and inaccuracies can lead to penalty notices being issued incorrectly. which then need to be appealed and so on, adding delays and administrative burdens. There are also practical considerations around how the exemptions would work. In addition, there are infrastructure and cost considerations. So a camera location would require new equipment, power supply, and highways works, with quite significant installation costs of around 35,000, not including maintenance and operation. We'll send a more detailed written response out, but to summarise, taking those factors together, a resident-only ANPR system would be difficult to implement and sustain effectively. But we do recognise the importance of looking at the area as a whole. In Benson Street and Canterbury Street, measures have already been introduced through the local highways improvement process, including road narrowing and priority give-way features to discourage larger vehicles and reduce through traffic. At the time, other options such as a one-way system or modal filters were explored, but they were not supported by residents. If the views in the area have changed, we'd very much welcome further engagement. The LHI process remains open for new applications, and officers are available to support that process. We understand that residents are keen to see meaningful action. In some cases, taking smaller step-by-step measures can be a helpful way forward. For example, a camera-enforced school street at Mayfield Primary School could help reduce traffic at the busiest and most sensitive times of day. So we're grateful to everybody that's contributed to the petition. The feedback is essential in helping us to understand those concerns and priorities. Whilst the specific proposal for an ANPR system is not currently considered a practical option, we do remain committed to working with residents to explore solutions that can improve safety and improve traffic impacts. So do please continue to engage with us, and a more detailed written response will be provided as well.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Mr. Sage, for presenting your petition, and thank you to everyone else as well for being involved. The first item that we have is a key decision on the Wheatsheaf Crossroads, which was presented by the Head of Complex Infrastructure, Nicola Young. So, Nicola, do you want to come forward and introduce the first item?
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines the progress and steps required to deliver the upgrade to the Wheatsheaf Crossroads junction. The junction of the B1040 and Wheatsheaf Road is an identified collision cluster site and was prioritised for funding through the Road Safety Programme. Funding was approved for the scheme in 2021 and the design work was completed in 2023. Delivery of the scheme requires additional land, and the land contracts are yet to be complete, having been delayed through issues beyond the Council's control. Whilst the Council continues to seek to resolve the land issues through negotiation, and indeed since publication of the paper we have received positive feedback that the parties will proceed on the basis of the negotiated agreed terms, the committee is asked to delegate authority to enable the commencement of a compulsory purchase process should the land contracts not be concluded through negotiation. The report also seeks approval to procure and then award a construction contract for the work. Both procurement and construction activities cannot commence until the land issues are fully resolved. The paper sets out an indicative timescale for delivery at paragraph 3.4. But should the land acquisition not be completed through a negotiated process and require a compulsory purchase, the programme is expected to extend by around 12 to 18 months. There are 3 recommendations contained in the report.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Before we go any further, we have the local member, Councillor Lowe, who I believe would like to come up. Thank you for joining us, Councillor Lowe. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes. I'll start. I'm just going to give a bit of background to this because I think probably 30, 40 years ago, it was originally agreed that it was going to be a roundabout. And unfortunately, I think with everything that came in after that, it pushed it down the list. So this has been in the making, if you like, for a number of years, probably a number of decades as well. It's It is a notorious accident spot, and there have been accidents since the 2021-23 approval of the traffic light scheme there, and residents are getting very fed up with the amount of time it is taking. I'm always explaining that, you know, they've had probate and other things, but I think this these works need to sort of come into fruition as soon as possible, because with it coming into winter, there's going to be more accidents there, because it always seems to be during the winter period that the accidents happen, obviously, because light diminishes and people don't always know, especially if they're new to the area, where exactly the crossroads are, because you can literally be coming from Bluntisham towards Woodhurst, and if you're on your phone, which a lot of youngsters are these days, they miss it, so crash into somebody that's going past, or they might just about get away with it. So I think it really is priority to get this sorted.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. And indeed, I remember this coming to my first ever committee meeting before I was even chair of the committee. So you are right that this has been going on for a long time. And it is tragic how many people die on our roads every year across the county. I think it's roughly 30 people die every year. So it is important that we look at road safety across the entire piece, because every death on our roads is a death too many. Members, do any members have any questions on the report though? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Nicola, for the report. You said in your words that you think the acquisition of the land has now progressed to a point that hopefully it'll all go through. So if that is the case, will the timescale that you give out in 3.4 be the one that's actually met? Because I think, you know, this has gone on, as the Chair has already said, long enough, and we do need to get this scheme built sooner rather than later. So I would just like confirmation, really, that you think that now we won't need to go down the line of compulsory purchase. Thank you very much, Chair.
Nicola, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we have had some positive news over the last couple of days. The deal isn't quite yet done, so we would like to, you know, keep the compulsory purchase recommendation there, just to make sure. However, all being well and getting those final signatures on the contract, we will be proceeding with the timescale set out in the paper.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Lowe said, this has been going on for a very long time, and I think all of us who live near to this site will recall the fatal accident that occurred, which was absolutely awful. And it's disappointing we haven't been able to progress quicker, but I understand the reasons why. So I really have two questions. The first one being, there's a cost for, I think, around £50,000, it says in the paper, for compulsory purchase, but would that include any purchase of the land? Hopefully we won't need to do that. It sounds promising that we can get an agreement amongst all the parties. My second question is, do we know if all the various stakeholders are still willing to contribute to the level that they agreed to a while ago? I think I actually recall Councillor Lowe asking me a question in another place very correctly to say, you know, is the funding in place from the District Council here? And hopefully it still will be. Is it something we just need to check on as well?
Yeah, so thank you. So the figure referred to in the report regarding the cost of compulsory purchase order is the legal and costs for the compulsory purchase. There will also be the land acquisition cost for the scheme. To note that in relation to the funding from Huntingdonshire District Council, we've recently been able to confirm that that funding is still available and extend the terms of the agreement with Huntingdonshire District Council for that £500,000 contribution.
Thank you. That's welcome news. If I could, Chair, sorry. We don't know what the cost of purchasing the land would be if we got to that point, do we? We're not aware of that yet.
We've had land valuations done through the negotiated process, so we have a pretty good idea of what the cost of land would be if we went down the compulsory purchase route.
Thank you very much. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. I really sympathize with the local members' comments because I think it's really difficult to explain to the public how something approved, at least in theory, back in 2021 can't even start 5 years later. But of course, I understand the complexities, some of the issues that are outside the council's control in this case. And as we have heard, it's not only for going on for 5 years, it's been going on for 40 or 50 years, you said. So I think it's really important to kind of keep that public confidence and update residents accordingly. So I do welcome the positive news in the verbal report earlier, but I also would like to ask some questions around what if it doesn't go as planned. I really hope it does go as planned and everything is sorted as soon as possible. The time frame in 3.4, it does say that if we need the compulsory purchase, this of course extended by 12 months. So we're coming into this period of LGR when we have the shadow authorities, but the council is still existing technically until 2028. If that was the case, how confident we are that the project can actually be completed until the county council actually disappears? Because I think it's very difficult to actually transfer the ownership and of the budget implications of that project if you're literally in between two councils. So that's quite concerning in that case. And secondly, I want to just ask a more general question because I was thinking about why those things take so long, and I know some of the complexities around this. But if something is as important from like a safety point of view like this crossroads, could have there been any point when CPO could have been considered earlier, or is it really like a matter of this is the last resort and we obviously try to negotiate first? But I'm thinking if something is coming to like close to 5 years and issues are not resolved, would it have been a point when the council could have said actually we're considering CPO sooner to get this done? Thank you.
Thank you. So just picking up on the timescale, you're right. In 3.4, it notes potential extension to the programme by around 12 to 18 months. Should we need to go down the compulsory purchase route, one of the first steps will be to map out in detail the programme to go through that. So that is an estimate of 12 to 18 months. We would hope that it would be a relatively straightforward CPO, although there's obviously no guarantees. So we would need to map that through quite carefully and work with the delegation to commence that process, which is with the Exec Director for Place and Sustainability in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair. So we would work through that in more detail. In terms of the CPO process being considered earlier, whilst that would have been an option, clearly the preferred route is always to try and secure land through a negotiated process, which we've been endeavouring to do. I think it was referenced earlier, there were some challenges with the land going into probate that would have also made the CPO process more challenging for us to pursue at that time. We are now in a position where we could take that route forward if required, although hopefully, all being well, we won't need to.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other members on this? No? Okay, in that case then, thank you very much, Nicola. I think we seem to be having broad agreement here. I don't think I'm seeing anybody disagreeing, but just to recap what we're being asked to do, it is to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee to proceed with a compulsory purchase order to acquire the land if necessary, and B, subject to the conclusion of the land acquisition, approve the commencement of the procurement of the construction scheme, and C, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee to award and execute a contract for the provision, construction, extension periods. I don't believe I'm seeing anybody that disagrees with that. No, in that case, then I will take that by affirmation, and I'm excited to get this one delivered. It really does need to happen. Next item on the agenda is an update on the delivery of the busway safety works, which will be presented by the Service Director of Transport and Connectivity, Jamie Cook. So, Jamie, over to you to introduce that one, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides an update to committee on the progress of the delivery of the safety improvement measures on the guided busway. This is our second progress report following the update we brought to you last December. The paper sets the context for the current programme of safety works, detailing the risk-based approach which underpins our operational decisions and the substantial programme of fencing, crossing upgrades, flooding mitigation and maintenance, which is all designed to reduce the risks of accidental incursion and intentional incursion as well. The report also explains that once the separation fencing is in place, we will turn our attention to the important issue of ensuring that bus speeds can be safely increased, which will very much help to restore quicker and more reliable journey times for our passengers. The paper outlines the rationale for the continued programme of safety works on the northern section, including the separation fencing and flood mitigation packages. In terms of the actual delivery of the works, the separation fencing from Histon to St Ives is expected to commence in the late summer, following a procurement of a construction contractor to perform the works. An options appraisal is also underway to outline the detailed design for the flood mitigation. Section 8.1 of the report sets out the financial implications of the safety measures, including an increase in costs to the fencing due to the requirement for some enhanced fencing on the southern section. The recommendations proposed in the report seek endorsement of the continuation of the delivery of the busway safety measures on the northern section and support for continued mitigation of the identified risks. I'm just happy now to take any questions.
Thank you very much for introducing it, Jamie. Another really important safety paper. First up on my list, I've got Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. A number of members have received representations regarding the embankments and verges that sit between the busway track and the maintenance track / bridleway. And I wanted to ask about how we could address the concerns that have been expressed. There is a concern about any proposal which would fence off the embankment or verge into the busway, because that would undermine that feeling of and visual ambient effect of rurality and open space, and create the effect of a long tarmac maintenance track bridleway tunnel. There's also the safety implications of that, because if you've got a tarmac tunnel effectively running outside the busway track and the verge or embankment, you've got a high-speed corridor that could be used for all kinds of antisocial behaviour or criminal purposes, whether theft, county lines, stolen motorbikes, all kinds of things, and would make people using that bridleway feel very vulnerable because of that, and increase the risk of collisions as well, and reduce the feeling that you could safely overtake someone if you were going along that cycling or whatever in one direction. You've got a bit more space to avoid collisions, and it increases the overall usable width of the bridleway, as well as, from a wildlife point of view, reducing the potential for wildlife collisions with buses. Also, in terms of the environment, it provides a much more comfortable surface alongside the maintenance track, and helps sort of lower the temperature in that area as well, potentially. Makes it probably easier to maintain and mow, and is probably more cost effective if you're fencing a fairly straight line as well. So there are a number of quite strong reasons for, in a sense, giving that verge or embankment back to people using the public bridleway / maintenance track. And I was wanting to know whether that is something that we could move forward with as an approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jamie, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you very much for the question. So I think the first thing I would say is we very much recognise that the shared use track alongside the busway is incredibly popular with pedestrians, cyclists, wheelers and equestrian users. The design and position of the fencing along the busway has been determined on a risk-based assessment and various local constraints, including buried services and just the nature of each individual area along that 12-kilometre stretch. The grass verge, as you've outlined, is substantial. It's between 4.5 and 5 kilometres, and it varies in its nature. In some areas it's very wide, in some areas less so, and in other areas there's also substantial gradients difference as well. So from our perspective, I think it's really useful feedback for us. We will very much consider this on a location by location basis and risk assess the assessment and therefore the placement of the fencing and also the type of the fencing as well to make sure that it's appropriate for the local area. So as I say, very useful feedback, and we've had similar feedback from our public meetings, and it's really useful for us to understand the way that people want to use the maintenance track on the verge and also some of the wildlife concerns that have been outlined as well. So we will very much keep that in mind with the design and with the risk assessment and placement. The other point I would just like to make as well is that we are looking at the maintenance track, and as you've outlined, some of the issues on the maintenance track of the various users and the way people interact with the maintenance track. We've got a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit in place at the moment, but we'll also look at other potential controls we can put in place as well, particularly where the maintenance track is narrow. We're very pleased the maintenance track is so well used. It's an incredibly successful active transport corridor, but we're very much aware of some of the issues along the track, and we'll seek to address those.
Thank you very much. And just, Councillor Dupre, I would say that I also support this point. We obviously need to leave enough space next to the busway itself so there's a safe refuge if somebody finds themselves on the busway due to breakdown of whatever reason. We need to make sure that that's safe, but I would also really support us leaving as much of the maintenance track unfenced as possible. Sorry, Councillor Dupre, did you want to come back on that?
Just come back very briefly. Can we be kept apprised of the progress of this before we see things actually implemented? It would be good to be kept in the loop of how much, where this is possible and how much of this we can achieve.
Thank you. Jamie, I hope I can nod and say that yes, we will be kept apprised of it. Thank you very much. I'm wondering whether that's something we need to take as an action to make sure we're kept informed on it, or whether that can just be delivered normally. But if needs be, if we can take that as an action, that would be very useful. Next up on my list, I've got Councillor Hathorn.
Thank you. I have two lines of questioning. One directly relates to concerns I regularly get from residents, and this is an ongoing programme of works, and the concerns have been the same throughout, but I think it's quite important to ask them in this public committee. And secondly, then it's my own sort of response to this paper. So my local residents have been in direct correspondence with the Health and Safety Executive in regards to the separation fencing between the maintenance track and the busway, and they say that the HSE states it did not tell the County Council to install fencing. Residents then argue that because the HSE did not demand separation fencing, that the County Council had no requirement to install the fencing, and that I should have voted against the proposal for fencing. So there's a number of points in this question, but why is the council installing fencing if the Health and Safety Executive did not demand it? And what would have happened if councillors had voted against the proposals for fencing? Residents also argue the council does not understand the impact of closing the crossing points local people have used for decades, in some cases centuries. Does the council understand quite how valuable these crossing points are? Residents also argue that the County Council did not perform the necessary risk assessment, equality impact assessment, environmental assessment and public consultation. And the final point is that residents complain that the fencing is too draconian, and just common sense is sufficient because people aren't going to trespass or step out in front of buses on the busway. Shall I ask my own questions after these ones?
Go for it. I'll let you come back on those ones, Councillor Hathorn. Jamie, do you want to address those first points, though?
Sure. Thank you for the questions. I will start with the point around the Health and Safety Executive and the requirement for separation fencing. It's true that the Health and Safety Executive has not instructed the council to install the separation fencing. However, the Health and Safety Executive requires us to perform a thorough and very detailed risk assessment, and from that risk assessment to determine an appropriate set of controls for the identified risks. And clearly for us, there are quite substantial identified risks in terms of accidental and occasional intentional incursion into the busway. The fencing really, from our perspective, was the only practical measure that could prevent that. If we were not to put the fencing in place, there's an argument that we may not be able to continue to operate the busway, which is, would not be something that we would not be a situation we want to find ourselves in, given how much our residents and visitors to the county rely on the busway. It's very much the case that the Health and Safety Executive do not direct action, but they will very much expect us to have taken the appropriate action based on the risk assessment. As well, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, we are required, because the busway is a workplace, to separate people from moving vehicles, and the only practical way of doing that is through a set of railings or fencing. So that's very much the reason for us installing the fencing at pace. The crossing points question, we very much recognise this. I know through the 4 public meetings we've held so far, crossing points and the utility of crossing points is something that understandably our residents feel very strongly about, which is why we run the consultation on the reopened crossing point that we plan to put in place in Histon, and we've been very happy to engage with residents in detail on that to make sure it offers the best possible utility. We will continue a similar approach as we work our way up the northern section as well. We're very much aware that local people have understandably grown accustomed to being able to cross the busway, but the situation we have at the moment with the busway being classed as workplace, we need to ensure that we're enabling people to do that in the safest way possible, with very safe crossing points, well-lit crossing points, and crossing points that meet the BritPave standard. The BritPave standard is the document that we work to for the design and construction of busways, and it's very important that we're able to evidence best practice in relation to those guidelines. In terms of the assessment for the fencing, now clearly we've worked at pace because we are currently engaged in a proactive management intervention with the Health and Safety Executive, and we want to demonstrate delivery of the safety measures as fast as possible. However, we have assessed the impact of the fencing. So the fencing has been, first of all, risk assessed to make sure that it's going to make users of the shared use track and users of the busway safer, but also important. Ecology and wildlife has been a very important consideration for us, and it's been really helpful to engage with residents and people that have got that local knowledge at the public meetings. We've been able to run our ecology impact assessments and install the mammal apertures, which are the gaps in the busway at regular intervals to enable the free movement of wildlife, particularly deer. We're very mindful of that, and I think as we work our way further north, this is also going to become increasingly relevant as we get to areas like Ben Drayton Lakes, to ensure that we've really considered wildlife across the whole of the route, and we will continue to do that. In terms of the fencing and the point made about people relying on their own kind of sense of where they are in the environment and therefore the fencing perhaps not being necessary, what I would say is, first of all, the workplace regulations, as I've mentioned, very much place a strong responsibility on the council as duty holder to ensure that appropriate controls are in place, and having gone through that process in detail, we feel the fencing is required as a result of that. But also, we have unfortunately had a number of incidents of incursion into the busway and near misses, which we record quite often, which further demonstrates that we need a physical barrier and method of separation between the shared use track and the guided busway itself.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hathorn, did you want to come back and ask your other questions?
Yes, and thank you for that. And the public meetings and the newsletter and the members' regular briefings have been really helpful, and I really appreciate the way this process has been rolled out. So when I read this paper, I read the paper, and it talked about the continuing rollout of the proposed fencing, and that the plans are emerging and blah, blah, blah. And then it suddenly said, and this is going to cost another £6 million. I thought, oh, wow, that's big. And then it said, as per the recommendations. So I went back to the recommendations, and they didn't mention £6 million. And I thought, okay, have I missed something? So I reread it, and I hadn't. And there's a £6 million reallocation of money. And I met with officers in advance because I was considering bringing an amendment, but actually I was reassured. But I think it's important to ask the question here. So there's a requirement that we agree with the continuation of the programme, with a request. Papers asking us to agree with the continuation of the programme and a request for a reallocation of money. And at this moment, we don't have a detailed plans as to what we're actually spending money on, because there are no design drawings, and we don't know, and we might, what is being proposed might be appalling. And it struck me there weren't that we were just saying yes now, and then we weren't able to say no. What happens if the proposals are really bad? What are the checks and balances? And yeah, I think that's sort of the question. Sorry.
Thank you for the question. First of all, on the issue of the increased cost of the southern section fencing. Southern section fencing is very nearly complete. There's just a few more panels to install before that is in a fully completed state. The southern section presented particular challenges, first of all, because of the pace of delivery, number of near misses in that area. The shared use track is clearly very, very popular across the busway, but even more so on the southern section with the biomedical campus and Adam Watts Hospital as leading to Chompington in the city. Very important to get that fencing installed quickly. And as we began that process, it became clear that because of the amount of people using the shared use track, the fencing had to be of a higher specification in order that it was rated for crowd loading. So it cost a little bit more to deliver than we first anticipated. And also we wanted to deliver it really quickly as well. For the northern section, the situation is slightly different because we will go through a competitive process with the Eastern Highways Alliance, first of all, which we're doing for both the design and the construction of the fencing. As we've also discussed this morning as well, there is substantial grass verge through the northern section, which may mean we can do something slightly different in those areas. We don't know that for sure yet because we're going through that detailed design process, but it's possible that there could be a lesser specification for that area and therefore that will be reflected in a lower cost. So hopefully that answers the question around the reallocation of funding. Very much take on board the point around the designs. We do have a little bit more time for the northern section, so I think through our divisional members, we very much look to engage with the local community on the designs early and make people aware of what it is we're putting in each location, so nothing comes as a surprise to anyone. The fencing will look different in the northern section. It will be of a slightly lesser specification because the risks are judged to be slightly lower in the northern section, but very much take on board the point around the requirement to make sure our communities get view of that fencing well ahead of installation.
Thank you very much for that, Jamie. Next, I've got Councillor Bulat.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a few questions on funding as well, and then like maybe one other a bit more straightforward one. So I'll start with the funding questions. So basically what we're saying is that we are planning and expected to spend double than what we currently estimated. And I do note in the paper saying, well, it's an enhanced fencing solution. What I'd like to understand is like, how can we explain that to our residents in more simple language, I guess, because when you look at the paper, it's not like, well, we need a higher spec and we need to spend a bit more. It's double what we initially estimated. So the question that anyone looking at this without knowing all the ins and outs is, how could we underestimate so badly in this situation? So I'd like to see some breakdown perhaps of to how much of this almost doubling the cost is the higher spec of the fencing, which I'm sure it is needed, but how much is the actual, materials and fencing, and how much are other costs that were incurred with, potential delays due to this or additional workforce required or what else was in that project? Because I guess from a public perspective, you just see, it's double the cost. Why, why is that? The concerns around the funding are around the especially maintenance, because we're saying that we had the unallocated future maintenance funding, and we're saying that there will be no maintenance funding secured beyond 2030. Obviously, we know that the busway will continue to need maintenance. I know LGR is coming as well, so I'd like to ask what the thinking is around kind of post 2030 maintenance. Are we recommending to future authorities saying, basically there's no money left for this, you deal with it, or are we perhaps in the next year budget cycle thinking about how to deal with the situation, because the maintenance will be needed? And finally, on funding, the overall budget for flood mitigation obviously is reduced as a consequence of that, from 7 to 3.9. So the question is how prudent it is to actually take out some flood mitigation funding, because of course this is a major issue, and similarly to Councillor Hathorn earlier, when the options come back, obviously to be a much reduced option. So what kind of scrutiny time we have on actually reviewing those options, because obviously what we can deliver within 3.9 won't be what we could have delivered when we approved the 7 million, if that makes sense. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bulat. Jamie, are you able to address those points?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So first of all, on the budget, I think originally, the original estimates were based more around a traditional kind of 3 or 4 bar wooden fence for the busway. As we got more into the proactive management intervention with the HSE, and as we risk assessed the various areas carefully, it became apparent that that would not be suitable for several reasons. First of all, unfortunately, it's easy to climb over, and we were aware that that was an issue in certain locations. And also from a long-term maintenance point of view as well, it would be likely to cost more because it would require more treatment, and actually also be, unfortunately, more susceptible to intentional damage as well. So for the southern section in particular, we've had to do something on a more enhanced basis. As we get to the northern section, the specification is of a lesser specification in all likelihood, but will still retain its features of being easy to maintain and being long lasting as well, which is really, really important for us. In terms of the maintenance budget, we will consider that carefully, and I think we will get to a stage where we want to build a new maintenance budget based on the asset once all of the safety works have taken place. It's clearly a very complex asset, lots of lighting on there, lots of quite complex infrastructure that's perhaps a slightly more unusual to a normal highway in terms of the guided tracks and beams, all of which we have a programme for. So I think we will look very carefully at what the maintenance budget needs to be once we have completed the safety works. Flood mitigation, we are aware, is very important and a really key requirement for our communities. That the options are being assessed for that at the moment. I think there is potential for the fencing solution on parts of the northern section, particularly where there's the grass verge, to be slightly more simpler, therefore more cost effective. I think that will help us with the flood mitigation package.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. There's a couple other points that I'd actually just like to point out as well before we go any further. Firstly, obviously there is a do nothing cost here in that we're well aware that the HSE has fined us £6 million before for breaches. So therefore, it is really important. There is, as well as doing the right thing from a safety perspective, there is also a financial implication of making sure that we do the right thing. And the worst possible outcome would have been for us to get fined again, because that money would simply just disappear. On the point of budget, though, it's worth pointing out that we didn't actually have a maintenance pot funding 5 years ago. It was something that was introduced under this and the previous administration, and it has obviously been incredibly useful to have that. Previously, it was just used out of normal maintenance funding, so that's obviously something we're going to have to look at going forwards and how we can make sure we have the right amount of funding for it. But historically, before 5 years ago, there was no separate maintenance pot for it. It was all just taken out of normal maintenance funding. Brilliant. Do I have any? Oh, Councillor Morgan.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify on it's showing another person, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify on the repairs and prevention of flooding that we've previously had votes on this to have the options explored, but I thought that there was money set aside as part of the sort of lawsuit on the construction of the busway for fixes to the flooding issue. I thought that was one of the main things that the original lawsuit on the construction of the busway was fought on, was whether the flooding risks had been sorted properly. And I thought there was a mitigation fund as part of our settlement with the contractors. So can you just explain to us whether you think we have enough financing to properly fix the flooding issues?
Thank you for the question. So we do have an allocation for flooding. We've done some reallocation of the budgets because of the increased cost of the southern section fencing. But we are working on the options appraisal for the flooding, so we will very much take that forward. Those options will be due back in around 6 weeks' time, and we will balance the budget to be able to take a flooding solution forward.
And may I ask, just to follow up from that, when we had the settlement with the contractors, was the money set aside not is it not legal? Does it not legally have to be spent on the flood prevention, or was it just a sort of general recompense for the substandard delivery of the busway to begin with?
My understanding is it's not specifically ring fenced. I will need to go back and check that point, but yeah.
No, from my understanding, it wasn't ring fenced. It was put in place due to construction issues with the busway and nothing to do with the flooding mitigations. Brilliant. Do I have anybody else on this one? No. In that case, then we are being asked to note the risk profile attached to applied to the continued delivery of the busway safety improvements and endorse the continuation of the delivery of the safety works on the northern section of the busway. I don't believe I'm seeing anybody that objects to those recommendations. No, in that case, then we will take that by affirmation. Thank you very much. Moving on, the next item is an update on the procurement of the term service contract, which will be presented by the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, the Service Director of Infrastructure and Project Delivery, David Allett, and the Head of Commercial and Contract Management, Lisa Swanell, are also here to help answer questions if we have them. But over to you, Graham. Welcome to your first committee meeting, and please feel free to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your warm welcome at the beginning of the meeting and repeated now. I very much look forward to working with committee members, so I look forward to that, but also working with you in your role as local members as well. So turning to this report then, at the January 2026 Highways and Transport Committee, members discussed the term service contract, delegating authority to the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability to negotiate a varied extension to the existing term service contract. The contract relates to the provision of reactive highways maintenance. Today, I'm presenting an update following constructive discussions with the Council's highways provider. The Council has now agreed the terms of an extension to its contract with M Group to 2030, which represents an extension of 3 years. The contract is focused on improving quality and responsiveness, delivering a revitalised highways service that supports safe, well-connected travel across the county. We are committed to driving up performance and seeking the best deal for our residents and road users. To do so, the Council has secured notable enhancements on behalf of its residents to secure greater value for money, thus making budgets go further and delivering higher quality repairs. The changes have included the introduction of fixed costs, which gives greater certainty to the Council to enable it to better plan and utilise its highways maintenance budgets, an enhanced quality control regime to ensure fixes are right first time and repairs are delivered on time, a regime to incentivise the supplier to meet the agreed response times and the required quality based on a schedule of financial deductions which are applicable where the supplier falls below the standards laid out in the contract. The collaboratively agreed enhancements secure a better deal for Cambridgeshire's taxpayers a year ahead of the current contract expiry. The extended contract will also enable a safe, compliant transition through local government reorganisation. Further benefits and improvements are laid out in paragraph 3.2 of the report you've got in front of you. Mobilisation of the revised contract begins in July 2026, so as early as this week, with key improvements rolling out over the summer and beyond. Engagement events are arranged for the staff at M Group and our own highways team to signal that this is a new way of working and clarifying the importance of delivering on the new expectations. This report, Chair, asks members to note the progress update, and of course, we're very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. We've received 2 public questions in relation to this item, as well as a petition signed by 367 people. I would first like to invite Tim Andrews, who is joining us online, to present the petition to the committee, which has been published online and circulated to members. Nick, do we have the Zoom up and running now? I'll look to the technology. Brilliant. Hello, Tim. Can you hear us?
Hello. Yes. Right. Okay. So petition first.
Yes, Tim. So
which makes
just
sense
to say,
because they are both the petition and the question are very much related, as it turns out. Okay.
Tim,
so the petition is this.
Tim, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Just to say, yes, petition first. You've got 3 minutes for the petition, and then we'll get the response to that, and then we'll move on to your question straight after that, if that's okay. So over to you, 3 minutes.
First, be aware that Cambridgeshire roads are in a shocking state with the greatest number of potholes per mile in the country, according to the most recent survey by Go Compare. The county council's road maintenance regime was recently rated amber by the Department of Transport, and this was a narrow miss of being flagged as red. Second, be aware that residents frequently say that although potholes have been filled, they soon open up again. There is a widespread view that taxpayers' money is not being used wisely. We therefore call on the County Council to get a grip of the road maintenance contracts to improve the quality monitoring and consequences for the contractor of substandard work. We further call on the County Council to ensure that the contractors operate under a transparent regime which provides council taxpayers with value for money and which delivers high quality road maintenance as standard.
Thank you very much, Tim. Do we have, is it David Owlett is going to respond to the petition? Thank you.
Thank you for the petition. The survey referenced mentioned some facts and figures that aren't reconcilable with the County Council's own data and records. The survey mentioned isn't recognised in the industry. However, the council, like many other authorities nationally, so over 80%, was ranked amber in the most recent highway maintenance scoring by the Department for Transport, and we continue to explore how we can improve on that score in future. We recognise that the quality of our road repairs is important, and we focused on ensuring that all defective work is identified and rectified. We've recently extended our term service contract. We're incentivising our contractor to ensure that the quality of road repairs is correct, and where repairs aren't of sufficient quality, our contractor will be fined as well as rectifying the issues. We randomly quality audit a minimum of 5% of all pothole orders raised, and this means each year we'll be assessing over 1,000 individual potholes to ensure they meet expectations, and based on those quality audits, we also have photographs so that we can inspect and assess a much larger number. So I hope that provides some reassurance.
Thank you very much, David. And just to say, I also don't recognise those numbers. I just went and looked it up on Go Compare, and they don't tally with anything that I've seen in the way of our data. So I'm not quite sure how Go Compare did that. I know in some other industries that I work in, though, quite a lot of people love a good SEO page, and therefore they'll just pull up some random figures and do it. But over to you for your next question.
Okay, well, I've just referred to the petition. I timed the petition knowing that the contract with M Group was coming to a break point where it could be extended or the council could re-tender. So to my considerable surprise, indeed horror, I now learn that a deal has been done behind closed doors to extend the contract with the same contractors until 2030. So my question for you is this. I've seen you quoted in the press stating that the contractor will be fined for poor performance. So please can you explain what the KPIs are for the M Group's M Group's work, and how the penalty and any reward clauses will work, including what transparency council taxpayers will have about the performance of the contract, so that council taxpayers can see for themselves that they are receiving value for money. I ask you, as you have been quoted as saying that this information is commercially sensitive. With all due respect, council taxpayers need to know how to judge that a deal done behind closed doors with an existing contractor is value for money for them.
Thank you very much. David, I'll let you answer first, and then I might make a few points myself.
Thanks, Councillor. As part of the contract variation agreed with M Group, the Council has strengthened performance management to ensure that the contract is held to clear and measurable standards. the contractor is required to complete works right first time and within agreed timescales, whilst also meeting defined quality standards. Financial penalties have been introduced to incentivise the contractor to deliver works right first time, where performance falls below agreed standards, and if works are late, which will reduce the amount that the council pays, ensuring that taxpayers do not fund any poor performance. It is the case that some of the detailed contract provisions are commercially sensitive. However, we will be monitoring performance on an ongoing basis. We also report on overall contract performance through our governance and scrutiny processes so that elected members and the public can be assured that standards are being met. So in summary, the contract does include clear performance measures, financial consequences for underperformance, and ongoing oversight to ensure that council taxpayers receive the level of service they expect and deserve.
Thank you very much. And Tim, I do just really want to push back on the point that you've made about decisions being made behind closed doors. Now, obviously, some of these are commercially sensitive, so they weren't right to be in the public domain. But we've seen some members of this council suggest that they weren't aware of it. That is not the case. There have been various appendices that are confidential for this item, but they have been available to all groups. All groups have been involved in the spokes meetings for this one, where the items have been brought and where questions have been asked. So while a number of these items were not fully in the public domain, every single councillor has had an ability to know what is going on via their groups and via the spokes for this meeting. So I don't think it's right and fair for the public to characterise it as being entirely behind closed doors. And I think that sets the wrong narrative of what's happened. Obviously, though, we do need to be aware that some things are commercially sensitive and therefore cannot be in the full public domain, but councillors are able to see that. But thank you very much for your questions. It was good to have you here. We next have Councillor David Landon Cole from Huntingdonshire District.
Sorry,
Council.
excuse me. Do I not get a follow-up question?
No, you don't in this committee. There aren't follow-up questions.
Oh.
Thank you very much, though. Thank you for coming along. I would now like to invite Councillor Landon Cole from Huntingdon District Council to present his question to the committee. Councillor Cole, you have 3 minutes to present your question to your question, and the lights will go red and then green. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I'm David Landon Cole. Thank you for the promotion. I'm actually on Huntingdon Town Council, but I'm here as me rather than on behalf of the council. I'd like to ask about the new communication strategy that forms part of the agreed variation with M Group at 3.2 of the report. I welcome it's included. The report says that it will achieve better notification of works to residents. I'd like to give the committee an idea of what better needs to mean. Conygear Road runs through the Oxmoor in Huntingdon, past a community centre, a school, a care home, sheltered housing, a church, a mosque, and it carries 3 bus routes, including the busway B. When it was resurfaced recently, the chair of the mosque found out with one working day's notice that the road would close on Eid. Residents were messaging me to ask if they could still drive to the GP, where to get the bus to work. That's a problem. The resurfacing is welcome, but I think the strategy needs 3 things. Firstly, more time. These were planned notices, planned works, but notices were going up on Thursday for a Tuesday start with a bank holiday Monday in between. Secondly, more information. The post said a road was closed, but nothing about diversions, alternative routes, who to contact. I called Dews and Stagecoach, the bus companies. They'd found out about the closure at the same time as the public. In the case of Stagecoach, 10 minutes before I called them, and were left scrambling. And thirdly, more channels. Not everyone is on Facebook. So parishes, local radio, WhatsApp, physical notices for key roads. The report says the variation brings in financial deductions for work not delivered on time or to standard. So my question is, as the communication strategy is developed this summer, will minimum notice and information given to residents be written into the specification and held to the same standards with the same consequences for failure? And can I just finally thank the highways officers I spoke to? They were genuinely super helpful to me and to residents in getting information and just sorting things out. They were genuinely really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Landon Cole. And firstly, I apologise for saying the wrong one. I think we have got 261 parish councils across Cambridge, 271 district and county councils. I don't know how many parish councils we have as well, but it is brilliant to have you here as one of those. David, are you able to address Councillor Landon Cole's question though?
Absolutely. Thank you. Very clear question. And your 3 key points are also helpful and relevant to the approach. Communications led by the County Council, but clearly we need to work closely with the contractor. The new communication strategy within the contract variation is intended to deliver a meaningful improvement into how and when residents are informed about planned works. So this will include clearer and more timely information about upcoming works, and that will be published through the council's website alongside our other channels and liaison with parish and towns councils. As well as this, we're seeking to improve the coordination of activities on the network itself so that disruption's more predictable, better understood and better managed. Communications will be clear and comprehensive, so this will include details such as expected timescales, diversions, alternative routes, and who to contact for further information. And this should ensure that residents, transport operators, and other stakeholders are not left trying to find information at short notice. We'll also be introducing, as part of the variation, a dedicated out-of-hours emergency contact service, and that would relate to emergencies covering live sites across Cambridgeshire. So anything that represents an emergency can be communicated quickly and can be dealt with promptly. As the communication strategy is finalised, expectations around notice periods and the quality of information provided will form part of the contractor's obligations, and we'd monitor it in the same way that we'd monitor other aspects of performance. So thank you for your comments, and especially thank you for your comments about the highways officers. It is really appreciated, and I'll be sure to pass it on.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to throw out there another stat that was we get over 30,000 road permit applications every year. So there is a ton of street works that goes on, be it us or other utilities. And it is an issue that we have. Actually, you make a very good point about how we surface the right information that's useful. I know in Cambridge City, all us councils get the TTROs that are coming up, but the list is actually so extensive that it's really difficult to work out what's important out of it and which ones are simply somebody, filling a pothole on a side road for 20 minutes versus what is, a major piece of works. So it is something that we are looking at how to surface not just all information, but really good information that is useful to people, because it is such a big task. But thank you very much for coming and asking your questions today. It is greatly appreciated. Now, members, we do have an exempt appendix for this one as well, which outlines some more of the commercially sensitive details of the contract. If members want to discuss that, we will need to move into confidential session, and that we would do that after the rest of the meeting. So if members do want to discuss any of that, please do either indicate to me now or during the course of the meeting, and we will do that. But as far as possible, I would like to try and keep this in public session, because I think it's important the public hear as much of this debate as possible. So if you do want to move into private session, though, please do indicate and we can do that afterwards. Members, do I have any questions or comments? Who wants to start me off? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, David, for the report. Sorry, it'd be better now. The question I always get asked by my parishes is, when we're going out and we're repairing potholes or whatever, they get marked up by our officers, and then the team comes out and starts repair, but they do not repair all the potholes at the same time. Some get left, don't ever get done, even though they're marked up yellow. Is the new procedure going to make sure that every pothole that is marked for repair is going to be repaired? And do we have the correct number of officers to be making sure that the repairs are done to the correct standard? Because for my residents, I will be going out checking, once I know what the standard is, to make sure that those potholes are repaired to the correct standard. Because if they're not, I will, for one, be reporting that back to you, David, if it is not. but I just want to know whether we will have the correct number of staff to making sure that the potholes are all repaired, and that when we do repair potholes, that they are to the correct standard. And when we're then, the other point I just want to make is with regard to when we're closing roads, can we please make sure that we do all the repairs on those roads at the same time, so that we don't need to go back with a future road closure, which happened in one of my villages, whereby they closed the road one day, repaired some, and then came back a few days later and closed the road again, but there was no notice for that road closure. So I just think we need to make sure that those sort of things are sorted out going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. David, do you want to respond to some of those points?
Yeah, thank you. So our highways maintenance officer orders defect repairs based on the level of risk. So we assess depth, size of pothole, for example, and order it on a particular time scale. And the contractor is then required to address within that time scale. And if late under the varied contract extension, the contractor would be fined for doing it late. Now, the contractor works with the council to try and coordinate those works with us. They need to make sure they hit those service level agreements and those timescales, whilst also there is a collective mission there to try and minimise disruption and be as efficient as possible in delivering those works. So there is a coordination activity that takes place between the contractor and our permitting and street works team. So that is what we seek to deliver is defect repairs that are as coordinated as possible, with ultimately the contractual mechanism being the service level agreements that are set out there. In terms of the question about do we have enough resource to quality audit? Yes, you'll recall last year we introduced a new system that provided mobile working, which provides a very efficient way of us reporting in any observed issues there through the HMOs out there on the ground. We physically audit a minimum of 5% of defects, but also as part of the contract extension, we've introduced a photograph requirement, which then can allow, if we become aware of an issue, we can very rapidly do essentially a desktop review of defects to check their quality. So I'm confident that we have resource that we need to do to stay on top of quality.
Thank you very much. Go on then, Councillor Gardner. Do you want to come back?
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to the photograph, is that then being taken by the contractor, and is that then sent directly to the officer so that they can see the state of the repair from at the moment as soon as it's done?
That's correct. It goes into our Aurora system, which is the communication between the officers and through to the contractor.
David, do you want to talk slightly, just to fill in from that one? I know there's been a lot of conversations about quality and, you know, how many we're able to check. Those photos are a really good bonus. There is also an ability for us to come back later if we discover that a repair is not up to standard, right, and be able to use those photos to inspect it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a 5% sample, a dip test, but if there are any concerns as part of that and we want to increase the level of audit, we've got the photographs, we can increase the number of bods out and about on the network checking more. And just to highlight that if we do identify quality issues, not only does the contractor receive a fine, they're also required, they have 28 days to rectify it at their own cost.
And those photographs are kept for a period of time, so we can always go back retrospectively if we need to. Brilliant. Sorry, next on my list, I've got Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I've just heard that we inspect a minimum of 5%. So if I'm concluding correctly, in reality, in most circumstances, we rely on contractor self-certification. So therefore, would I be incorrect to conclude that the repeated complaints of poor repairs from residents is in fact true, because we don't in fact inspect pretty much all of the repairs at all? I mean, 5%, considering the scale of this shire is minimal.
Taking potholes, for example, 50, 60,000 potholes a year that's repaired. A key point there is the minimum 5% is what we physically go out and inspect, but under the new arrangements, we've got a facility in there to absolutely scale up if we become aware of any issues or concerns, so we can rapidly scale up that percentage, and also the ability to do a desktop analysis through the photographs that will be coming in means that we'll be able to check many more.
And Councillor Ian, I think it's really important to say that 5 years ago, we had no randomised sampling at all. So when I first came into this administration, we asked how many were failing. And essentially what was happening was they were comparing the number of reported failures against all potholes put together. And at that point, I said, we need sampling. You need to actually do a dip test to get an idea of what the failure rate is, because that wasn't being done beforehand. So that's where we put in place the minimum of 5%, so as we can get a randomized sample of what our quality is. That doesn't stop any officer, though, that sees a bad repair, or if there is a bad repair, often it will then be reported as another pothole. At that point, the quality can be called on that one as well, and they can be made to go back and redo it, and will be fine in this case. So that's a kind of 5% minimum sample size to make sure we have a really clear picture across the network, rather than meaning that that is all that there is in the terms of quality. Sorry, David, did you want to say something else?
And also, just to avoid if I've created any confusion, it's 5% of orders. Some of those orders could have a couple of hundred potholes in, so it's 5% of orders rather than potholes.
Thank you. Councillor Irons, did you want to come back again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I welcome that, and I also welcome that we're going to be doing more sort of desktop analysis on the fixes. But I mean, how are we tracking sort of the repeat potholes? If you can just further expand on that, where the same location fails again after the repair.
This is something that the new system really helps us with. A new modern system that we introduced last year helps us to very quickly extract the data of where have we been, where are the defects, and then that can factor into our prioritisation process, which this committee considers each year to look at the capital programme. So a key prioritisation for capital investment that we consider is which locations are repeatedly failing.
Thank you very much. Next, I've got Councillor Edge.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, quality is a really important thing here. We've already talked about that quite a bit. I think the other thing that this contract is kind of showing on paper is simplified ordering processes. I think talking to my local HMO, they want to be out on the road as much as possible, and obviously the current processes avoid them being able to do that quite a bit. So I think my question is really two-part. Is how is that new ordering system for them going to change them so that they can be out on the road more? And coming back to the quality side of things, is the expectation that those HMOs are going to be doing the quality checking, and therefore how much of their additional time is going to be taken up by that, and is that going to take them away from being on the road?
Yep. Over the last 3 years, we've really been on a journey of modernising and improving the service, and we've taken every aspect of how the service works, really, and it has taken time, but we've equipped the service to deliver in a modern and efficient way. I can't really underestimate the benefits that the mobile working that we've introduced adds. The fact that officers are able to report in defects, check defects, communicate through to the customer, through to the contractor, all through a modern system. The system that we were using was almost 30 years old and unsupported, so very difficult. So I think one thing that's been constant throughout, certainly one thing I've seen ever since being in the service, is there's always been a lot of effort and energy in there, but I think we've had to do an awful lot to find new ways of being efficient. And the technology and the way that we set up now really allows us to deliver more with the people that we've got using the power of technology.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
do you want to come back to the end?
Yeah, sorry, it was a little bit more specifically. If you are able to, just in terms of, so with the quality side of things and the checking on the quality, where's that responsibility going to be moving forward? Is it going to be with our highways officers, and how would that fit into their capacities?
We have roles called NEC supervisors that support us with this as well, but also the highways maintenance officer, as part of their rounds, effectively can call in issues. The interface on the system is much like ordering a cinema ticket or something like that. They see the defect, they call it in, and through their iPad, it calls it through to the contractor. This issue does not meet the quality. This repair does not meet the quality requirements. So it can be easily fall within the day-to-day duties of the highways maintenance officer. But in addition to that, we have NEC supervisors that can provide additional support.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Hathorn.
Thank you. So, like I'm sure many other county councillors in this room, I spend far too much time flicking through Report of Fault just to try and assess what's going on in my patch. And it always tells a lot of stories. So there's always reports which are out. There's always reports of work which haven't been looked at in time, and then work ordered which hasn't been delivered in time. Is that flagged up within the system? So does that automatically get flagged up? Because it doesn't get flagged up on the system that you can see as a member of the public, but inside the system of the council, if work is late, does it automatically get picked up for a penalty, or is it all sort of manual? And if it does get automatically picked up, is there any way that could automatically go onto the system so that we can see what's going on? And then again, there's this sort of lack of clarity. So I've got a temporary pothole fix, which has been there for ages and looks appalling. And I assumed, and I was going to ask a question about this, and I assumed that it was a failure of the contractor, that the permanent fix hadn't happened. But apparently, if it hasn't been ordered, then it's not a failure of the contractor. And so again, it's all just so messy. But as much of that as possible, it can be on Report of Fault. It does make it easier for residents to keep on reporting, saying you haven't fixed it. So I guess, how does this all merge with the new system, which was supposed to be amazing and to solve a load of problems? And if work is delivered really badly, should residents be taking a photo and submitting that as well? Because again, I see that on the system, and I see that not being picked up apparently on the system. And residents would love to see when they've submitted faulty work and the council has picked it up and it's gone through the system, contractor find. That would be a really great thing to see new work deliver and a fine implemented. So how does this new contract mesh with the reporting system that the public see and us county councillors also see?
Thanks, Councillor. So we've recently introduced some improvements to the reporting system that draws from the new Aurora system that we've got. So it's now easy for customers to see when the council has placed an order, the timescales that they've placed that on, which helps to then understand the performance. In terms of if a member of the public sees an issue, a concern, whether that's a new defect or if it's a repair that seems to have failed, I would encourage them to be reported in so we can assess it and rectify it. We're always open to further evolving the reporting system as well. Another enhancement we made recently is we added the capital programme schemes on there, so our communities can see whether or not a road in question is earmarked for planned work as part of the capital programme.
Thank you, Councillor Hathorn. And I have to admit, it's one thing I've asked for a while is an option on Report It to report bad workmanship. So I'm going to look to David again and hope that we can get that implemented at some point, because I think it is a really important thing for us to be having and being able to check and trace, because I think it's important to say that quality isn't just one person's responsibility, if that makes sense. And it comes to Councillor Ioannidis' point earlier on that we have the kind of 5% minimum. We actually have NEC supervisors. I think means that we're up to sort of 10 to 15% of sampling right now. It's then also down to our HMOs to be looking for things when they report potholes. But all of us can work together to make sure that we are making sure the quality is where it should be. I don't think it's practical for the council to be inspecting 100% of repairs just because of the amount of time that would take, and we actually need our officers to be doing things. So anything we can do to essentially between all of us crowdsource and make sure we are getting good value is really important. Right, next on my list though, I've got Councillor Damari Homan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for the report. You know, this does seem like a positive step. It's no silver bullet, but I've certainly noticed in my time as a county councillor things improving slowly and steadily, and particularly welcoming the new introductions to the public-facing Aurora system. That is really helpful. I do think one of the challenges that we face when people talk about low quality repairs is actually a lot of residents don't understand what a temporary fill is. You know, you see a splodge essentially in what was the hole rather than a formal patch. And I think Councillor Hathorn's point is on that is very important. I would really welcome more information on what we can do as local members and what the council is doing to ensure that those temporary repairs then get the necessary permanent treatment. I've seen plenty in both in my patch and just in the wider area that temporary repairs are now failing, having been there for a couple of months. So I'd really welcome some information on that. On the inspection side of things, it's great to hear about the NEC staff also looking at those, because for our poor HMOs, we really need them out marking up and ordering works. Obviously, any time they're doing an inspection means that they are not able to mark up new defects. That being said, obviously the inspections are incredibly important, but I think this is where these changes are really, really helpful to us as members, because we now have teeth. We know that where we see poor quality repairs, actually some action can be taken. So that's a hugely positive change. I've got 3 questions for officers. So my first one is the fining and the penalties. Would I be right in assuming that will only apply to orders that are raised after the new contract is adopted? So, for example, I know I've got some in my patch that have been marked up. They seem like they are outstanding at this stage. I'm wondering if it will apply to those, or if they would have to then be reordered for the fines to kick in. And then just looking at the report, 1.4, I think carbon reduction agreement with M Group sound is quite logical. I can see where that comes from. I'd be quite interested to know a bit more about what the biodiversity improvement plans are. And then looking down at 1.8, zero tolerance approach will be adopted for operatives working on behalf of the council to minimise the risks of roadwork abuse. I've spoken to both contractors, M Group staff, our colleagues as well. I'm aware that abuse is far more common than it should be. Obviously, this is a set of issues that residents feel are very frustrated, but ultimately those chaps on the road are not responsible for the conditions, and abuse is not acceptable in any way, shape or form. So I would welcome a little bit more information on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before answers, I do need to point out we have a large number of chapesses as well working on our roads. It really is amazing, some of the crews we have working. David, Lisa, over to you to answer those questions.
Hi. So in response to the first question about the financial deductions, those will only come into effect once we enter into the new arrangement. So we'll be rolling those out across the summer and beyond, and working with M Group to implement those as quickly as possible. But because it's a new model, it all comes together as one package. The second question about carbon reduction and biodiversity. So this is another new provision that we've brought in as part of the variation to work with them. M Group do this under another of their other contracts, and we wanted to take the opportunity to have that too. At the moment, we're in the process of setting up the working groups, which will be I'll have parties from M Group and the County Council on, and we'll be moving those forward. There will be obviously opportunities to influence how and what we do there, but at the moment they are at the early stages. But we are working closely with colleagues in our climate teams as well. And then the zero tolerance is something that is a subject close to my heart as well. I think we all see the abuse that our operatives, whether they're County Council or M Group or other parties on the network, receive. We're working with a number of groups and the police to try and limit that. We are looking at whether there are opportunities to prosecute where we have sufficient information, And again, we're working collaboratively with M Group to collate all that information. And if we have enough, it's not an easy task, but we're certainly taking it seriously. And it will be something that we will be highlighting again as part of the launch for the new contract, that nobody should have to put up with that.
Thank you. And Councillor Harriman, I just wanted to address another one of your points as well about a good quality repair. I think one thing that's really important for all of us to realise is that in Cambridgeshire we have nearly a £800 million backlog in highway maintenance, built up over decades of underinvestment. That means some of our roads are just not in a very good quality. And I know very much in your patch, one road very well, that even with the best quality repair in the world, it wouldn't last. What that road needed was resurfacing, and that road is now getting resurfacing. So we do need to be aware that sometimes a good quality repair is simply not a pothole repair. It's the fact that the road needs resurfacing, and that given that we have such a large backlog, it's not possible for us to resurface all roads right now. I mean, this year we have our biggest, I think, ever investment in highway maintenance. I think we're resurfacing 5% of the road this year. Over this administration, we'll be looking to resurface or surface treat about 20% of all of the roads, but it will take time to catch up to that, getting our roads back into a good state. So we do need to be slightly careful with our contractors here, that sometimes it's bad quality because it's bad quality. Sometimes it's bad quality because our roads need resurfacing. And that's a simple fact of the course that we need to be doing more of. Sorry, yes, Councillor Darren Hone, do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I fully appreciate that. As you're well aware, I've got some challenging roads in my area. And what we see a lot of the time is a repair will be made and then you'll see defects opening up around the side of them. I think it might actually be really valuable for us as members to have some guidance on what the standards are. I mean, I know that when a defect is opening up next to a repair, that's not a bad quality repair, but just some sort of briefing note that will help us all in our roles as a local member, I think would be really valuable. Thank you.
Actually, on that one, we are currently updating those standards, and it's the next committee meeting that an update will come to those standards, because we're looking at making sure we are doing more. And actually, there's an SRP meeting on Thursday, which I hope will possibly give some more money for more preventative work over this summer, and we'll be able to expand what we're able to do. But I'm not going to pre-roll with that too much. We'll have to do that when it comes back. But yeah, next committee meeting, there'll be a lot more detail on what we're doing and how we're working on improving all of that. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have no idea who would have thought it's a good idea to sign a contract back in 2017 with no penalties for substandard work. I think at the moment we're in the reality that we're just putting some of the basics that you'd expect in such a multi-million pound contract that simply did not exist 10 years ago. And I really think there's a wider issue across the country is how we sign those long-term contracts, and obviously administration change and priorities change, and there's no way to actually make those changes. And in a way, the whole system just benefits very large companies who often get a very good deal of taxpayers' money. But that's my view on is that the whole system needs to change in terms of how we do procurement on this. As for the report noting that the M Group has experienced challenges in delivering the service over the past winter, I would say that M Group has experienced challenges since the contract was really signed, obviously, in its previous iteration as the company. And I'm really not convinced public confidence would necessarily increase a lot with a few changes. However, I do genuinely hope that we'll make some improvements, because all of us here, like councillors, our officers, and especially everyone actually working on the highway in public facing roles do face some of the consequences of the public perception around this. And I having heard some stories from officers and people who have been dealing with difficult circumstances, I think often people who I guess make the profit out of it, they're not the people who actually are facing some of the abuse on, whilst doing their job on the street. And I think that's quite unfair. I want to ask on LGR, because I think we heard some of the public comments and petition and so on. I think there are kind of two, if I may gently put a couple of things across. I think one of the issues was around how perhaps some members who are not involved in this committee or spokes or the private session felt that some of the detail was perhaps known by the BBC the night before the press release was even circulated to members. So I think this, you can see some of the articles were published before all the members were even shown the press release with the contract being signed. So I think, as someone who worked in political comms before, I know how important it is to take control of the narrative, but I think it has impacted some people who might comment on this. On the confidential appendices and papers, I'm not sure necessarily it's true to say that all members have had access, because I know for a fact a couple of people who have been asking for some of those papers, and were told it was only for the people, you know, in that meeting and this committee. So it might be like something to check, because I think that's one where some of those comments have come from. So obviously not myself being involved because I had access to those, but I'm not sure if others had the same experience. I want to ask on the point around LGR, because 5.1 notes that proceeding to procurement would not support a safe and legally compliant transition to LGR. So of course, the council has been procuring all sorts of stuff since LGR has been announced. You know, if you look at the Assistant Procurement Committee, we would have been breaking all the rules at least for 1 year if we weren't allowed to, you know, procure and reprocure contracts. In my interpretation of the guidance, and you know, it's fine if it's like this, but it's all in our judgment as the council, what we actually need for the proper functioning of this authority versus what would unnecessarily impede the work of the next authority, right? So, of course, in the previous meetings in January, to my understanding as a member, like it was only one realistic option, because of course you can't leave things as they are because the contract was terrible to begin with. You need some changes, but we didn't have enough time, and there was not enough discussion around alternative options because A, LGR, and B, not enough time to actually explore things like in-house delivery and other things. So the question is, can the officers confirm where exactly the government specifically rules out reprocurement?
Thank you, Councillor Bula. And before we come to that, I do just want to thank you for your points made earlier, particularly on road worker abuse. I'm really hoping that everyone in this committee can agree that it is simply not acceptable, and that those people that are out working, come rain, come shine, come heat waves, come snow, deserve our respect and our appreciation for the work that they do on the network. Without them, the roads would be in a far worse state, and that we really need that. And also on your points about the contract, I think you're totally correct there. The contract that we had in place previously was simply not fit for purpose, and I don't understand how that was signed. This has now put it into a much better shape, and that is deeply appreciated. David, do you want to answer the points around LGR though?
Yeah, I mean, LGR was a key consideration, and it is something that we received guidance from the government on in 2025, and that was included in the January 2026 paper that the Highways and Transport Committee considered. But the stated purpose of the government guidance was to ensure that decisions regarding ongoing service delivery do not compromise the future sustainability of new councils that would be created through LGR, and do not fetter the ability of the future councils to deliver their strategic priorities. So within that guidance, it did set out a process for procurements, but one consideration that we made was that we have a faculty within the term service contract to extend, and through collaborative discussion with M Group to identify how we could vary that contract with a focus on quality, timeliness, and providing best value. And a key consideration was of course that safe and legal LGR transition.
Thank you. And just to add to that myself, I think it's been made publicly known that I would have preferred to have gone out to reprocurement, but I do think what we have done here is sensible. And it's also worth noting that we haven't gone out for another, we haven't extended it for a large period of time. It's until 2030. If we think the shadow elections are 2027, 2028, the new authorities come into place, I think it should give them just about enough time to actually go and do a really proper procurement exercise, so any new authority can get the contract that they want in place. So I do think it is a sensible, logical thing to do. And as you say, it brings so many improvements to the current contract. And the other advantage is it allows these improvements to come now, rather than if we had reprocured, the improvements would only be starting when the contract expired in 2027. So by being able to renegotiate this means we've been able to get all of these improvements in place from now, rather than having to wait. Next on my list, though, I've got Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I do have some reservations about this, and I think in the report I think it describes that M Group's work as challenging, or their issues they faced are challenging, which I think many of us probably see it as an understatement, bearing in mind the volume of problems that we experienced during the winter period. I'm still a little bit unclear, though, about why we didn't re-procure for this contract. I know you sort of alluded to it just now, but I think probably the public would need more of an understanding of the reasons behind that. couple of other questions I have is how will this be monitored? David did go into some sort of detail about the reporting of it, but I think one of the things we all find very frustrating is that the quality of the work hasn't been as good as we perhaps would have expected, certainly during the last winter period. And I think we do all find it frustrating when they'll come out and do a repair, and then right next door to it, there's clearly another patch that needs some work, which isn't included as part of that. And finally, I've been getting, and I think other members have, a number of reports about when vehicles are damaged because of potholes, and there's always a bit of a back and forth about when it was reported and when the work should have been done. And that obviously would go to an insurance claim potentially. So just wondered if we could have a little bit more detail about how that process might be improved or perhaps avoided entirely under this this extension. Thank you.
I think, Lisa, you have to answer this one.
Yeah. In terms of monitoring and making sure that we're holding the contractor to account, we now have a comprehensive set of financial deductions. Then the driving force behind those is to incentivize the right behaviour first time. We haven't got that under the existing arrangement. We have a series of KPIs, but they are a collective mechanism rather than looking at individual items, particularly potholes. There is a real focus in the new financial deductions on potholes, and they will be, there's a scale of penalties that we can enforce. So the idea is that we're trying to incentivize that right behaviour to get it right first time, on time, and to the right quality. We've clearly set out what quality we want, and we will be monitoring that. The new inspection regime that David spoke about earlier, about taking the photographs, doesn't just require them to take a photograph, it requires them to take the photographs to a certain standard to include set information so that we can clearly identify from a desktop basis whether those works have been carried out to our standard. We have the new Aurora system as well, which will help us identify whether they are completed within the right timeframes. We have obviously our Cat 1A, Cat 1B defects. So if they're required to be done within 5 working days, if they're not, we'll be able to penalise that. If the photo isn't up to spec, then the penalty will still be incurred. Does that? Okay.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Lisa, do you want to turn your microphone off? Thank you very much. I am just going to say something else as well, that while I think we haven't had the quality any of us would have liked this winter, and I think we would all hope for more, I think this has been a problem across the entire country, not just with many, many different contractors. I know when I speak to my peers, this winter was incredibly challenging for everyone, and it's not necessarily just our contractor. Every contractor has really struggled. We were really able this year to work with them to maximize the number of crews that we have. We went from normally in the winter time having about 12 crews to having 30 at some points this winter time. And that was partly due to us getting in early, but also partly our contractors working with us to manage to make sure that we could really increase the number of crews. So while things aren't perfect, I do think we do need to recognize that it is a problem across the entire country, and that we do have a really good working relationship going on there. Next up, though, I've got...
Sorry, Chair, I didn't get an answer about the procurement. I just wanted to get a bit more detail about that, if possible.
Okay. Okay, David, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. I was just going to come in on the point about insurance and damage to vehicles. So insurance claims are assessed on a case-by-case basis, and details are on the council's website about how to lodge a claim if a vehicle is damaged. As part of that process, we assess whether or not the route in question has been inspected or defects properly assessed, and a decision's made on that basis to resolve claims.
Thank you. And Graham, do you want to come in on the procurement side?
Thanks very much. Thank you, Councillor. I won't repeat what colleagues and Councillor Beckett has said already about procurement and particularly local government reorganisation, except to say that undertaking a procurement exercise for a contract and a service of this nature is significant, substantial. It costs the authority an awful lot of money to do so, legal fees, commercial fees, officer time, etc. So it doesn't come without cost in itself, and it takes a long time. It can take anywhere between 12 months, more realistically 2 years, to complete an open tender nowadays for a procurement of this size. So it's not a quick process by any means. And of course, there's lots of things to consider as you go through that process. There is a scope, you know, what services are going to be part of that procurement and part of that tender. What does the authority want to deliver in-house? What does it want to deliver through that contract? The specification, as we've been hearing about today, is always a hot topic for discussion with those decision makers around what the specification and the quality you expect, not just in quality of repairs, but the quality in the customer experience as well. So there's a lot of detail for the authority to make decisions on. There's also the length of the contract and all sorts of other terms within that contract. And I think it's absolutely correct that the complexity of that procurement exercise and the specification, everything else I've mentioned, is handled by the new authorities, so that those elected members governing those new authorities are making those decisions about their future service and how they want that to be delivered, either through the open market, through a contractor, or through an in-house delivery model, or a combination of the two. So I think it's absolutely correct that that procurement exercise is left for the new authorities to consider, and they can make those decisions in the interest of the residents that they will end up representing.
Thank you, Graham. And I do think that's an incredibly good point, that to Councillor Bulat's point earlier on, that we were tied by a contract that had been signed a very long time ago. At least the new authorities will be able to have their own contracts to their own specifications. Next up, though, I've got Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. In an effort to create my very own meme, when I was last on this council, I was the opposition member for highways for a couple of years, and I was not entirely, but pretty much shut out at the detail of a lot of the decisions that were made in terms of the detail. I certainly didn't see any confidential appendices, for example. I didn't, like in our January meeting, go through a confidential appendix, which many members in this room, not all obviously appreciate, but some members in this room of all parties saw the different strategies that the officers were taking and got to discuss them in a confidential session. So I'm wondering through you, Chair, if I can kind of hope to get some understanding from the opposition, how we can have a more constructive debate in public about this, that we don't have, I remember after that January meeting, having discussed many of these options, there were still some councillors, I'm not naming them because not all of them are in this room, who were coming out and saying, why isn't X, Y, or Z happening? When actually, that's exactly what we've been discussing in the confidential session. Councillor Ioannidis asked an interesting point earlier, and he's not one of these councillors I'm referring to at all, about the 5%. Well, you know, an interesting thing would be to see whether the reform group will bring forward an alternative budget proposal later in the year to employ enough officers or enough resource to get that, you know, 5% of orders up to 100% of orders. I suspect that might take a bit of a hit out of some of their other alternative budget proposals, but I would welcome it in the thrust of, you know, good opposition. You may well find that it's not possible because of all sorts of reasons. So yeah, through you, Chair, I'm just really hoping that after this meeting we've got a confidential appendix in here. We've all seen a number of numbers that are in it. We can all communicate with our political groups, that we don't have opposition members, if they don't propose alternatives, coming out and saying, why was the limit, which we obviously can't mention at this point because it's confidential, why was the limit why was the limit set so low? Why was it set at this? Why wasn't it set at that? So through you, Chair, I'd invite opposition to come forward and maybe help me out there and explain to me.
I'm just going to get you to clarify, because we do have members of the press here, that the limit is not particularly low. Well, we can't set the amount of it.
Yeah, that is actually... That is absolutely correct, Chair.
Thank you. I didn't want that to be taken away as a quote used for you. But next up, we have Councillor Ioannidis, who might be able to give us a response to some of that.
Thank you, Chair. On the proposal of Reform putting forward a budget and getting to 100%, I don't think that's what I was getting at. I was actually asking the question of why, because this is the first time I've sat on this committee. So it was a general question to get an understanding and clarification, and maybe to give us some ideas of how we could improve to get to 100%. Yeah, maybe quite difficult. So but I'm not going to suggest that reform could actually deliver that. So yeah, that's my comment on that. But it's not so much a question I have. It's more of an observation I've made during this this discussion. So, I mean, I'm sure all members would agree that this item goes to the heart of what our residents are complaining about every week. You know, potholes filled badly, roads patched repeatedly, and the taxpayers are wondering where their money's going. Of course, I support a tougher contract regime if it generally fixes those failures. You know, I think fixed costs, tracking, deductions, and quality controls are definitely moving us in the right direction. But I think residents will judge, well, they won't judge on the wording of a deed variation. They're going to judge on whether their roads are worthy against the tax that they're paying. So in terms of what I'd like to see, but this has been my first, I suppose, debate on the subject, and having sort of a fresh eye on the matter. I'd like to see the administration consider, you know, public dashboards that show properly the status of the reports. So things such as, you know, repair dates, expected completion dates, maybe also showing M Group's performance, such as if these are failed repairs that are being rescheduled, as well as proper recorded independent inspections, and any repeat defect data that's, you know, could be reported to us quarterly, including the deductions. So, you know, to summarize, I mean, I appreciate that we're catching up on a long and neglected issue, but I think what will go a long way is proper communication to our residents, and in their assurance, and in seeing that if the contractor fails, there is actually real consequences. So, like I said, it's not really a question, it's just sort of my observations, and I just want to get that on record and sort of my outlook on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, on the first point about the being able to inspect everything, I think what's slightly frustrating is this, as I'm sure you're aware, online certain things get taken out of context. So, you know, the 5% or 10% gets used as that's all you're doing, when actually there's a whole raft of different measures. And I'm sure if reform were ever in administration, they would have a whole raft of different ways of doing things as well. And it's very easy to take that out of context. I think we all probably have to be aware that it's simply not possible to check 100% of them. As you say, wouldn't happen there. In terms of the data, though, I agree with you a lot. We've got our performance indicators coming up, which has some indicators in it. There is work being done right now on member dashboards to be able to give a much better oversight of performance. The new Aurora system that we put in place at the end of last year gives so much more data that we are able to pull out of it. Has been one of the biggest changes I've seen in highways, to actually be able to have the data on those things in a way that is live and real time, together with that sampling test that gives us real assurance and real numbers that we can measure and actually judge ourselves on. So I do agree with you. I think we need to be getting as much of that out to the public as we can. And that is something that we are working on, is to try and release as much of that as possible so we can get people the reassurance. One slight point to point out, though, that you did mention their council tax being spent on roads. As I'm sure you're aware, very little tax actually gets spent on highway maintenance. The vast majority of council tax goes on adult social care, kids in care, schools. Very little of it ends up on highways, and that's just a sad fact of the way it goes with the pressures that the organisation has. So I don't want people to think that, you know, all of their council tax is being spent on roads and this is what you get. I think if roads were to get a lot more budget, we would see an improvement. We wouldn't have seen the level that we're in now. Do I have any, Councillor Dupre, do you want to come in? I think we should probably bring this to a close.
I will be brief, but I just wanted to say a few things. The first thing I wanted to say was that we inherited a dreadful contract from years ago. Looking around the table, I think I'm one of the very few people who was on the authority at the time that we were told that this contract was going to be put in place. And it was advertised to us as not just any old contract. It was a Marks and Spencer's contract. You know, it was a partnership for the ages. And I confess that even at that time, I struggled to see how that was going to be the case. And that has been proved right. It had woeful, basic, fundamental omissions. And we have suffered the consequences for years and years and years. That's not the only reason why our roads are not in a good state. Much has been said rightly about the long backlog of data, the long backlog of underinvestment, of failure to even know what the state of our roads was. There was absolutely no knowledge, no data. We've heard on several occasions about having to use metal detecting equipment to find where the gullies were. That was what we had, that we inherited, and we have come collectively as an organisation a long way since then. However, we have been pinioned not just by the contract and its obvious deficiencies, but also by the government's local government reorganisation process, which has thrown huge amounts into turmoil, has been an expensive and monumentally money as well as time-consuming distraction. And we still don't know at this stage what is going to happen to us. We're seeing judicial reviews from other authorities, and it may be that we'll get an announcement in a few weeks' time of what is going to be foisted upon us, which may well be, as other authorities have found, nothing that anybody was consulted about. And that has been an active barrier to us being able to do something more fundamental should we have decided that was a good idea to do. We have been left in a position where we could not assume the continuation of this council because it will not continue, and therefore making arrangements for better provision of services all the way around has been substantially stymied by the government. The third thing is data, because data is so fundamental, and it was one of the deficiencies we inherited. We couldn't rely on anything, frankly, and a huge amount of work has gone into understanding better the data that we hold on the condition of our highways. And we have made huge improvements, but I acknowledge there is a long, long way to go. But this organisation in the highways section is nothing like what it was when we inherited it, and that is all for the better. We know what needs to be done, we know what the deficiencies are, we know where we're going, we know what the state of our roads is, and we can start to address all of that properly. And a huge amount of work has gone in to renegotiation of this contract with M Group, and I just want to thank all of those involved because that has been a huge and time-consuming and detailed piece of work. We are putting huge amounts more into highways than has been done ever before. Finance has been put into the highway service in vastly increased amounts, and we're beginning to see a return on that, but it is nowhere near enough because of that long and historic deficiency. So I think there's room to say we're going in the right direction. There's also room to say that we have come from a previously really poor past, and we are moving into a future in which the government is really stymieing us. But we're getting there. I want to thank the people who did all the grunge work on this contract so that it is now something that we can start to see the benefits of straight away. I really commend this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. So this paper, we are simply being asked to note the report recommendations. I think we've had a really good debate on this. We've managed to stay out of the confidential side of things, which I think is really good. If any members do want to talk about any of the confidential stuff, though, either in confidential session or if you'd like to just come and talk about it away from the cameras and the press, I'm very happy to do that. But for now, I think we're being asked to note this report, and I think that's what we have done. Now, the time is 12 o'clock, so I'm aware we've been going for 2 hours. Our constitution requires us to have a break, so I think we need to do that. I'm going to suggest we take 10 minutes, and we're back here at 10 past 12 very quickly, and hopefully we can wrap up the rest of this meeting. But I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Thank you. Right, members, should we get started again? I'm aware of time. The next item is an update on the Humphreys Way A10 junction, which is presented by the Head of Complex Infrastructure, Nicola Young. Nicola, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper responds to a full council motion that was agreed on the 17th of March this year. The Humphreys Way junction on the A10 requires an upgrade linked to development, including signalisation of the junction, improving safety, increasing capacity, and addressing a severance for cyclists and pedestrians. Section 106 agreements are in place to provide funding towards the scheme, totalling around £725,000. There is an identified funding gap between the available Section 106 funding and the expected scheme delivery cost, which the paper seeks to address. As noted in paragraph 3.3 of the report, the Council has formally written to the Combined Authority in response to the motion, both to ask them to consider an allocation of funding to the scheme from the Road Safety, Small Capital Projects and Delivering Transport Strategy Aims programmes, now superseded by the Local Transport Grant, and to prioritise the junction improvements as part of the Combined Authority's funded A10 improvement scheme. The paper sets out the proposed routes for funding, along with an outline programme at paragraph 3.6 to demonstrate the scheme deliverability by the expected trigger date in spring-summer 2028. The committee is asked to note the update in the report addressing the motion.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Now, we do have a public question on this from Elizabeth McWilliams, who is joining us online. Elizabeth, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can. So over to you. You have 3 minutes to ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me speak at the meeting. Residents in Landbeach and Milton particularly have expressed frustration at the timetable for improvements at this junction further to the full council meeting in March and what they see as a slow pace of action. And with that in mind, my question is as follows. The paper at item 8 states that the council has asked the Combined Authority to select this scheme among many that are being considered for the same grant funding. Yet the motion to the March full council, before it was altered, asked for money to be allocated from the council's own unring-fenced capital budget. Given it's unlikely that the Combined Authority select this project for a road which the Mayor is on record as wishing to dual, and this authority will by then be in the process of being divested prior to local government reorganisation, what steps are being taken to include a provision for these works in the Council's next budget? Safety at the junction continues to be completely compromised, with yet more accidents since that meeting in March, and some Landbeach residents tell me they're now afraid to use the junction at all. With no backup plan, how will you explain to residents, including those 600 plus who signed my petition about this topic, which I presented to full council ahead of the motion debate in March, that you've neglected to fund a project that is so severely overdue, despite having passed a motion on it?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Nicola, did you want to respond to the question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the Humphreys Way scheme will be included in the prioritisation process for the 2027-2028 Local Transport Grant Programme. Prioritised schemes funded through the Local Transport Grant are presented to the Highways and Transport Committee annually in March and are subject to final sign-off by the Combined Authority thereafter. Should the scheme not be approved for funding through the Local Transport Grant, the Council will seek alternative funding to deliver the scheme in 27-28. This could include potential borrowing, and that will be explored further once we know the final position for the Local Transport Grant.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure you were watching, Elizabeth, earlier on for the Wheatsheaf paper as well, that as much as I would love road safety things to come forwards quicker, unfortunately in council some things do take time, particularly when they're complex. But thank you very much for coming and raising your question. Members, do any members have any questions? In fact, actually, I think to start with, you have Councillor Wyatt, who is going to read out something from Councillor Bradnam, who's the local member.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bradnam has asked me to read this on her behalf because she can't be here today. She says she's sorry that she cannot attend the meeting in person, but is very pleased that all members were able to support the motion at full council in March this year, of which one commitment was to bring an update report to this committee. The A10 Humphreys Way junction is a hazard that faces everyone who drives between Milton and Landbeach or Waterbeach and everyone who drives along this section of the A10. The junction is an accident cluster site, and between 2017 and 2024, by most recent data, there have been 6 slight collisions and 6 serious ones. She suspects the only reason there have not been fatalities is because congestion means traffic is often moving slowly through the junction. She notes also that the funding agreed under the original Section 106 agreement might have been a reasonable amount when it was agreed at the time in 2019, but since then costs have increased dramatically, which leaves us with quite a significant cost to cover. Residents in the local villages desperately want this junction to be improved with traffic lights, and can we please find a way of funding the work soon?
Thank you very much. Members, do any members have any questions or comments? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. In light of the Wheatsheaf Crossroads, does the council have to purchase any land to actually complete this works? Because if we do, then I think we need to look at contingency plans or compulsory purchase to try and get it moved quicker if that is the case.
Very good point, Councillor Gardner. I'm going to look to Nicola to answer that one.
Yes, very good point. No, there's no land required for the current junction design, and we will be reviewing that to look at opportunities for value engineering the junction as well. So we'll certainly take that point away. But as it stands, no, there's no requirement to purchase land.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sorry. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions just for my own clarification, really. So I'd just like to ask why the Section 106 contributions level was set low enough that it's now far below the delivery cost. And then the follow-on question from that would be, do we have any means where we can seek further development contribution or revised obligations before obviously borrowing is considered? I just want to check on that first. Thank you.
Nicola, do you want to address those points?
Yeah, certainly. So I think it was mentioned in the text that Councillor Wyatt read out that the Section 106 agreement was in place some time ago, and costs have gone up significantly since that time. We are looking at alternative contributions that might be available from other developments in the locality. So clearly, if there is something appropriate that we could draw funding in to support this, then we will pursue that in the first instance, and then we would look to fund by borrowing if there is any residual gap identified once we've explored all other possibilities for funding the junction improvement.
Thank you. And Nicola, can you just clarify, is indexation applied to the Section 106 contribution?
It depends on Section 106 agreements, but yes, there is index-linked funding for Humphreys Way.
But it's just gone up far in excess of that, which is leading to the problem. Okay.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. I mean, it is, unfortunately, the whole planning process is challenging at the best of times, but it is something we need to be pushing for to make sure this doesn't happen again. Obviously, there can be a really long period of time between planning permission being given and then, you know, the building taking place. So we need to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen again. It is a slightly disappointing position that we find ourselves in. Do I have any other questions or comments from members? Lawrence, oh sorry, Councillor Damery-Holman.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I did just a set of comments. I think this is, you know, I think all of us know in our areas that when development comes forward, unfortunately, the planning system means that these sorts of incredibly important improvements, they come so slowly. And in a time of such economic uncertainty, particularly in the last couple of years, but just inflation in general, you know, we do have some serious challenges. And then obviously trigger points mean that funding gets delayed and delayed and delayed. I think for me, being a representative in South Cambs, I'm even more concerned with obviously a development corporation coming in, which is going to take even more influence away from us to make request contributions for such projects. I almost want to ask if there's anything that we can do to have earlier trigger points when it comes to necessary highways improvements, because, you know, we're an area, particularly in Greater Cambridge, we're an area of massive growth. We're going to see significant impacts on the highways, you know, not just from an expanding population, but increased construction traffic. Is there any scope? Do we have any ability for future developments to try and secure funding earlier and to commence these works earlier, because it does feel that, you know, having 300 occupancy of 300 as a trigger, you know, the impact on the highway kicks in way before then. So I'd be grateful to know if it can do anything.
Yeah, so the triggers in the Section 106 agreements are based on a need identified through the transport assessment as part of the planning process. We'd always want to get in as early as possible, but it has to be done through that planning test.
Thank you, Nicola. It is always frustrating planning from a highways perspective, and in Cambridge City right now, there are large issues, obviously, with the fact that planning permission can be given, but then it actually needs to be built. And that then has a massive effect on roads needing to be closed. We've all seen the issues with Hills Road and the potential closures of that to be able to build things. Unfortunately, planning comes with a whole bunch of other challenges when it comes to highways every time. Councillor Ioannidis, do you have another question?
Thank you. It's not so much a question, just an observation, really, Chair. I mean, what I'm observing is that there seems to be then a planning issue, correct me if I'm wrong, with, you know, detailing proper infrastructure funding with that. Obviously, you know, I don't think that, you know, this should quietly become a county taxpayers problem, because, you know, the councils have failed to properly you know, plan out and foresee these risks and issues. You know, unfortunately, we are in this position now. It's unfortunate, but it's just an observation. I think that we need to really go back and look at how we are planning you know, our growth and getting the correct Section 106 funding in line. And I think touching on previous comments in regards to the triggers. You know, properly laying out, you know, earlier triggers would be more beneficial, so that we can actually get these works done, so we're not finding ourselves in the same situation again. It's just an observation I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know whether Nicola or potentially David, knowing your history on this one, can outline kind of when this was signed, because I think we do have issues with the time period of it. We even have issues where things have, you know, our perhaps standards have changed and that a planning was granted so long ago. But David, are you able to fill us in the background of this a little bit more?
Yeah, if I recall, planning was 2018 for this scheme. Section 106 agreed in advance of that. And as Nicola said, the trigger points identified through a process called the transport assessment process. So you look at safety and capacity, look at the development impact on an issue, and that's how the trigger is set out. As the chair says, we do things differently now. It's always evolving, the approach is always evolving, but this does represent a planning consent that dates back to 2018.
Thank you. And do we have confidence, sorry to put you on the spot, that we wouldn't be faced with a similar situation now, given how planning has changed and the improvements that have been made?
Yes, every site and its impact is assessed based on the evidence available. So, yeah, the process evolves to consider what would, in this case, I think the original phase was 1,1700 dwellings. What would their impacts be, and how would you mitigate them? So yes.
Thank you, David. And sorry to put you on the spot with that question. I know it's a little bit of a challenging one. Brilliant. I don't see anybody. Oh, Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. I won't comment on planning because I think a lot of it needs to be reformed and some changes are coming. But I think there's a pattern with a lot of those projects, in the sense that, like, the longer we wait, for whatever reason, obviously the cost increases and then the funding gap is even more difficult to fill. And one of the issues that I noticed as well, and I know there were some comments around the 810 scheme and the combined authorities response, is actually the alignment of those works with broader infrastructure projects and how we actually work with, you know, councils and the combined authorities. So I know that in the paper there's a mention that the combined authority is still waiting for an update from the Department for Transport on funding for the 810 scheme. So I just want a bit more detail in terms of, like, you know, what is going on with that scheme. Why does this time frame not match with this? Because it kind of makes sense, I guess, from a public perspective, looking at this, it kind of makes sense to do everything at once. I know this might not be possible, but I just wonder if at some point in the past it would have been possible to actually align those works, and also what's the current combined authority position on the wider scheme there. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola, are you able to give an overview of the CPCA scheme?
Yeah, so as noted in the paper, the A10 improvement works, the Combined Authority are awaiting an update from Department for Transport on whether the scheme will continue to be included within the Major Road Network Fund. They are expecting a formal decision on that, I think, ahead of the summer recess. The timing of the A10 improvement project extends beyond the trigger point for delivery of the Humphreys Way junction that has been set through the planning process. The A10 improvement scheme is currently at outline business case stage, so there is further work to do to complete the outline business case. It will then need to go through to a full business case ahead of delivery, and clearly there is a lot of work to do in developing the options and the potential funding route from the Combined Authority in order to be able to deliver the A10 scheme. So unfortunately, on this occasion, the two projects don't align from a programme perspective.
Thank you. I do think we need to be careful. Then you make a very good point, Alex, that what we don't want to do is deliver a scheme that then gets ripped out again with any A10 scheme. And I know there is a lot of public pressure to put things on here, but I don't think the public would thank us to do a scheme to then rip it straight out again and, you know, waste taxpayers' money on something like that. So we need to be very cognizant of all of those things, and hopefully we'll get more clarity from the Combined Authority soon. Obviously, one of the scheme suggestions, and I know it's not the Mayor's preferred one, he seems to prefer full dualling, but one of the other options is junction improvements, where I'm assuming this would very much be one of those junctions that needs junction improvements. But Lawrence Damery-Hogan, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring some clarity to some comments. So thank you, Nicola, for the answer. You know, it's very much confirmed what I expected, that our officers are diligent and they do everything they can within the processes available to them to secure funding at the earliest possible stage. Unfortunately, I'm very much of the view that, you know, development is significant in this country. We continue to do it, but infrastructure-led development is lacking. You know, I know that the local planning authority, in this case, this would be the Greater Cambridgeshire Planning Service, you know, all of our officers do their utmost to deliver for their communities, but we are bound by national legislation. And actually, I think it's for all of us, of all parties, to be calling on the government to be including it in our own manifestos to make sure that the development is infrastructure-led. Obviously, we feel this acutely in highways, particularly in a high-growth area. We already have so many congestion challenges, but it's not just highways, it's green infrastructure, it's social infrastructure, all of these things. But I just want to say thank you to Nicola and all the staff working on this, because it's really difficult, and ultimately it's our residents who suffer in the face of a challenging system. And, you know, I appreciate Councillor Needy's concern about our council taxpayers footing the bill, but unfortunately the way the planning system is, when it gets to these sorts of points, what choice do we have? Do we leave dangerous junctions that, you know, risk even more collisions, possibly fatalities, or do we have to borrow? And, you know, I think this is it's a national issue, exacerbated by austerity and lack of funding in our essential services. And, you know, going back to our previous item, you know, even just the state of our roads, that's another safety concern. But this is years and years of chronic underfunding. So, yeah, a big thank you to all our hard-working officers, and I'd just a plea to all of us in this room to take infrastructure-led development very seriously and ensure that we are banging on the doors of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Damery-Hogan. Some very good points there. And I also want to extend my thanks to our officers for all the work that they do in all of this. Councillor Dupre, and then I think we'll wrap this one up.
Thank you. Firstly, to agree that this is an absolutely horrible junction. I have used it on occasions. I try to avoid it whenever I can because it really is ghastly. And I don't think there's any disagreement around the table about that. The issue is how we tackle this. Firstly, is the government going to tell us that this is a scheme that it's going to commit money to or not? When is it going to tell us that? And when is the government going to be clear about its view of the future of the A10 Ely to Cambridge corridor? The second question is, if the Mayor is wanting to press ahead with full dualling, where is he going to find the Combined Authority's required contribution to that? Is he clear about that? I've not heard where that's going to come from. If he wants us to spend our contribution towards an enormously costly full dualling scheme, show us the money on the table, show us how you're going to do that. And I agree entirely that without clarity from the government and from the mayor, it would be catastrophic to spend a huge amount of money investing in a junction that is then going to be completely ripped up. Public confidence would hit rock bottom at that stage, I think. I'm really feeling my age today because, like, I'm one of the few remaining members who remembers the discussion about the implementation of the contract with M Group, or whatever it was, 2 or 3 iterations ago. Skanska, wasn't it, back in those days? I'm one of the few members around this table who will remember that there was a motion to this council years ago, so old that it was actually in Old Shire Hall. And I have a kind of kinesthetic memory of where I was sitting during that debate, about junctions, about junction improvements, about how we could and should be pressing ahead with junction improvements, not only at Humphreys Way, which is awful, as I say, but also Streatham and Little Thetford, some of the other junctions on the A10, which are really horrible and which are not only dangerous but also slowing up the traffic. And that was a very long time ago. We are no further forward because we haven't got the clarity to get any further forward, largely. And I really would beg the government to make a decision and communicate that decision. And I would beg the mayor to be open with us about how he's going to achieve the dualling from Ely to Cambridge that he so favours. Because if that is all just warm words, we have heard that promise for decades. Residents are getting fed up with the "you will have dualling with jam tomorrow." It's not happening. It hasn't happened for years and years and years. And we need actually to knuckle down and do some things that we can actually do something about and do quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre, and I wouldn't like to total up the amount that the mayor is currently promising across this county. I think between the A47, the A10, a light rail system, we're into the multiple billions that we don't have that are currently promised as priorities, but let's not go on to that. Let's wrap this one up then, unless any members have anything else burning they want to say. No, so we're being asked to note the update in the report, which I think we have done. The next item is the latest performance management report, which was presented by the Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, Graham Kane. Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair. Of the 9 performance indicators reported to this committee, 7 are updated this quarter. 5 of those 7 are contextual. The remaining 2 are currently rated as red, having missed their target, and I'll give a bit of clarity and commentary on those now. So the first relates to a topic that was being discussed earlier in the meeting, H&T 004, killed or seriously injured casualties. Work in partnership with the police and neighbouring highways authorities continues in an effort to bring down the number of people who are sadly injured or tragically killed on our roads. The Fatal Collision Review Board meets quarterly and will continue to do so in order to analyse trends about causation to inform future thinking on prevention. The Road Safety Partnership is also focusing efforts on engagement with the at-risk groups who have sadly been represented in these KSI figures. There's an increasing number of instances that show clear links to criminal use of the road, including drink and drug driving, and this will inform the Road Safety Partnership's approach to education and enforcement. On the 7th of January 2026, the government published its road safety strategy. The Road Safety Partnership will now align its approach to the 4 key themes of the government's road safety strategy, which are outlined in your report at 3.18. The partnership will also be reviewing the target associated with this performance target to ensure it aligns with the government's new strategy. Turning your attention then to H&T 7, percentage of Category 1 and Category 2 defects repaired in line with the highways operating standards. As we've been discussing at length this morning, a number of reasons why this has been challenging over the last few months. This winter in particular saw a significant number of potholes in these categories, creating a downward trend in the performance against this category with a low of 28% in January. This is a common experience with neighbouring highways authorities who have also reported that this last winter was one of the worst for the damage it did to our roads. The Council continues to focus on improving the response times to effect repairs. By March, performance had improved to 55% and remains an area of acute focus for the Council's highways team. Members have been discussing for some time this morning, of course, about the important changes that were being made to the service and how it is delivered to further improve response times and reliability. Extra resource has been introduced on the network, and a weekly coordination meeting has been put in place to tackle the issue since January of this year. Whilst repairing existing defects is essential, the best way to avoid the impact that winter weather can have is to seal as much of the highways network as possible through preventative maintenance work. We've got an extensive programme of carriageway works underway worth over £35 million for 2027 alone, and we're continually seeking to extend this further with additional investment and making sure we're being as productive and efficient as possible with the resources we have available. If I can now turn your attention to the risk section of the report, which is section 4. The table in 4.4 gives an overview of the status of the risks on the Directorate Risk Register that are relevant to this committee. All 4 risks remain static, meaning the assessment of the residual risk has not changed since the last report in December 2025. 2 are currently undergoing careful review. The risks relating to the highways procurement strategy is being reviewed in light of the current changes that you've been discussing this morning to the term services contract. And also the road safety risk is also being reviewed in light of the government's road safety strategy, as mentioned earlier. I expect both reviews of those risks to be completed in early July. I'll end there, Chair, and my colleagues and I are more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do I have any questions? No? Okay, that's... Oh, Councillor Edge.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to actually come at this from a slightly different angle because I had an incident in my own parish, and I know we try not to be parochial, but I think it's really important. In one of my parishes where on the footpath, and when we're looking at all of these KPIs, they're very, very road centric, and I appreciate that's probably where a lot of our data comes from, which comes back to what we were saying earlier. But I'm really fearful that we don't have any data on the quality and the impact of incidents and accidents on our footpaths, because certainly from what I saw, I would say I'm not surprised that happened. The officers in my area dealt with it very quickly, and the footpath was resolved very quickly afterwards. But I just feel that we should be looking slightly beyond just the kind of the road issues when we're looking at our kind of SKPIs. So it's just an observation really, rather than anything else. But or I could pose the question: have we looked at that at all? Is it something that we think we could be looking at slightly differently moving forward?
So I'll start, and I'll ask David and Jamie to come in on some of the details. So you're quite right. The pavement, if you like, and you sort of using layman's terms, the pavement is important as the road surface for different reasons, but it should be as important. The criteria for assessment's different as well, of course. But the pavement, I would expect the pavement alongside a road is assessed at the same time as the road is assessed against different criteria, perhaps, but still assessed nonetheless. Footpaths away from roads and the carriageway are more challenging than that, and depending on the nature of the footpath probably determines how often it's inspected. I don't know if there's any more detail you can mention around that, David or Jamie.
Yeah, I'd just highlight that we have a prioritisation approach for our network that extends beyond just the roads, footways, cycleways and public rights of way. So we do consider the whole asset, and we consider a range of different factors in which footway gets invested in and when, part of which involves usage, part of which relates to what walk survey data that we have from condition. So there are specific allocations as part of the capital programme for those.
I'm just going to pick up on that a little bit as well, which is, I think historically, when we came about 4 years ago, we saw that our footpaths were in a really bad condition and had been neglected. They're still not brilliant, but we have put a lot of focus into improving the footpaths over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. One issue we have with footpath in terms of data, though, is that for our roads, you can send what's known as a scanner van down it, which essentially uses LiDAR to give you a very quantitative-based analysis of the road condition. Footways we don't have the technology to be able to do that in the same way. There are always a more qualitative walked assessment of it, which therefore means that your data is a lot harder to show consistency through it. It is one of the things. I actually went to Milton Keynes recently, where they're looking at using robots to be able to go and drive down the footways and see whether you can analyze it that way. There are always ways of looking at it, but at the moment, across the country, the majority of footpath assessments are done the same way as us, just with somebody walking down it, which makes the data not quite as good. Do you want to come back there, Councillor Edge?
Yeah, so yeah, I think where I appreciate all of that, thank you. I think where I'm coming from is obviously more where, so obviously with the highways, we know when fatalities happen because certain people get the data passed to them, unfortunately, and it's collected by the police. But you know, if somebody's been picked up in an ambulance and taken to Addenbrooke, it's because they've tripped over on one of our footways. Pavements, footways, whatever way we want to say it, then I think it's really important that we're capturing that and we're seeing the data on that. I don't know how frequently it happens, but you know, the amount, you know, the speed that we're meant to be responding to pavement repairs indicates to me that it's, you know, it can, you know, people trip over more than they have road accidents.
Yep, I can come back to you on that a little bit as well, because I don't, you know, I did a bit of research a while ago with Addenbrooke Hospital, asking about the impact of snow and ice and slip strips on footpaths there. And it is actually really quite incredible. I think I'm doing this off memory now. I think it was 10 people spend 10 days in hospital for every week of bad weather, and something like 150 visits to the fracture clinic. And that doesn't factor into our road, you know, KSI data at all. Whereas obviously somebody spending 10 days in hospital, I would probably put that down as a serious injury. It is something, I'm sad Simon's now left, who's our road safety expert. I believe Simon's doing a lot of work with the trauma network at the moment to try and identify those. The problem we have is that the NHS doesn't always classify things or ask those questions. But actually, that is something that I really do feel like we should be doing, is working with the trauma network to be able to categorize when somebody comes in, what happened, where it happened, any data that we can get of them, because you're exactly right. Particularly, I think a lot of the data we get comes from insurance companies, and you know, people report a road traffic accident because there's an insurance claim that goes with it. Most people that fall over on the pavement don't report that in the same way, so you don't have such a clean data source. So the only access we have there is the trauma network, and we need to be working with them to try and do that. Anybody else? Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just following on from that in regards to slip, trips, falls, etc. on our pavements. Could we not use any, I suppose, mechanisms or applications that we already have in place, or things like, I mean, like Street Doctor? Could we not gather data and reports from like Street Doctor or from residents that are reporting, you know, trip hazards or you know, etc.? Is that something we've looked at, and if not, why?
So I don't know about Trip Doctor in particular, unless anybody else does here. I'm looking at my officers and nobody's. Maybe we can ask that a briefing comes to spokes on what we're doing around that, and that might fill it in a bit more. And I know Simon has been doing lots, so we can probably get that data from what he's been working on. Are we able to add that as a spokes action? Brilliant. Okay, anybody, anything else? Councillor Bulat.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask a question on indicator 7. Obviously, I appreciate the challenges and like the performance getting back on track slowly but surely. But obviously, we are in the March figures is 55%. Obviously, previous years 93. I just wonder how was the target of like how many months you'd expect to take to go back to the previous levels of obviously defects repaired in line with highways operating standards, and what is the expectation around what would be realistic to kind of go back to the previous position. And then a follow-up from that, obviously I noticed that apart from the 3 indicators in red, the 6 remaining ones are contextual, but you can clearly see in some of them, you know, an improvement. So I just was wondering if there is an opportunity to perhaps look at some of those indicators to maybe have a better way to actually say, is it improving? Like, can we set some other targets on some of those? I realize that this is not the case on every single indicator because some are truly contextual, but, you know, just reading this paper, you think that some of them actually clearly show an improvement. And I think the public should know that. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you have any answers for that, or do you want me to answer it a little bit?
Well, We do want to recover the network as fast as we can, and we're in discussions with the contractor about how we can supplement the current reactive approach to deploy, for example, more Dragon patching out on the network. So can't give an exact date where the issue will be resolved, but we continue weekly coordination meetings, and we're looking at how we can deploy the plant that we've got more effectively to get us back in where we expect to be. But we can see the trend is looking positive.
Thank you. I probably can say a little bit more that 2023, I believe it was July, August time that we got back to normal levels again, which was, I think, the last time we've had such a bad pothole experience. That was a dreadful one. But I think it does take a little while to recover. But just for your reassurance as well, we are doing everything we can, and David and the team working with the contractors to get that down, because you're right, it does need to come back down. Anybody else? No. Okay. In that case, then we're being asked to scrutinise the performance indicators, which I believe we have done. Next item is the outturn financial monitoring report of 25-26, which again will be presented by Graham, and our finance business partner here, Becky Bartram, is here to support any financial queries here. Welcome, Becky. Thanks for coming along. Graham, do you want to introduce the report there?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Becky, for joining us. This outturn report refers to 2025-26, where there was an overall underspend within the revenue budget of 6.7 million across place and sustainability. Section 3.1 summarises the main variances within the responsibility of this committee. They include an underspend of 530,000 relating to highways maintenance. It's important to note this does not represent a reduction in the maintenance programme, but was a result of capitalising some maintenance activity to reduce pressure on the council's overall revenue budget. And in fact, there was a partial offset of this capitalisation as a result of overspending on pothole repairs, because we delivered more activity as a result of the challenging winter period, which we've discussed a number of times already. Within traffic management, there was a far higher volume of temporary traffic regulation orders, or TTROs, than in previous years, which resulted in an overachievement of income to the tune of 1.07 million, whilst within highways development management, a total of 820,000 was released from reserves from income previously received as developer fees. The street lighting budget was underspent by 860,000, partially as a result of the council's investment in LED lighting, thus reducing energy costs, as well as obviously energy consumption. Paragraph 3.3 provides a summary of the variances within the capital budget. Across place and sustainability, there was an overall underspend of 28.1 million. Schemes within the remit of this committee underspent by 23.4 million. The main variance was on project delivery schemes, which underspent by 14.8 million, with key underspends in active travel schemes. Wheatsheaf Crossroads, of which you've been discussing earlier, of course, in the earlier item, and March Area Transport Study were two of those items. Highways maintenance schemes underspent by 4.3 million. However, this represents a delivery level of 91.2% of the programme, and represents a continued focus on rolling out preventative treatments across our highways network to prevent it from deteriorating into potholes. Appendix 3 sets out further service level explanations for the capital variances, whilst Appendix 2 provides further details on the revenue variances. And with that, Chair, I shall stop, and we're very happy to take questions.
Brilliant. Members, do I have any questions on that? Sorry, Councillor Damery-Ho.
Thank you. Just looking at the TM traffic management team and the overachieving of targets, I understand from speaking with colleagues that the TTRO workload has been very high. Is any of that funding available to support additional resource within that team?
You're right, it's been higher this past year. It's obviously very difficult to predict the ongoing levels because it does vary from one time to another. So it's always a balancing act to try and get the size of team you need for the number of TTROs or other applications that come through, other licenses, permits, etc., to come through, trying to get the balance between what you need within the team and what the demand is going to be, which of course fluctuates. I think in the first instance, the budget would be used to offset any overspends or underachievement of income across the general authority. So we have to consider we're part of one council, we have to consider the whole council budget before we consider how to reinvest that into teams. But if we saw a long-term increase in that income, and therefore what might become an unsustainable demand on the team, then we could certainly think as an authority whether or not it's appropriate to use some of that overachievement of income to then invest in the team, as we would do with any team.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, on page 90, we state that the on-street pay and display parking income is lower than anticipated, and that options have been formulated to address this in future financial years. I wonder if you could explain a little bit more as to what those options are. Thank you very much, Chair.
Somebody able to say that for me, please? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So yes, the income has been lower than we expected, partly due to compliance and also partly due to people not choosing to park in certain areas. We've got a range of options that we are considering for really based around a standardisation of charging across the city and other areas, which will also be easier for visitors and residents to understand as well in terms of the restrictions.
Do you think it's important to say that any changes to parking would obviously need to go through the business planning process? And okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask how much of the 23.4 million highway and transport capital underspend is a genuine saving versus slippage moving into 26-27. Thank you.
So there was a total scheme underspend on St Neots Future High Street Fund of 1.7 million, and that scheme's funded by Hunts District Council. So the funding comes in to match the spend. The remainder of the underspend was in year only, so the funding will move forward into future years of the capital programme.
Thank you very much. That actually answered my next question, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Just to cheer everybody up, I've just read that the Prime Minister, that's Keir Starmer this week for the avoidance of doubt, has just announced that increased defence spending is going to be funded in part by cuts to road and energy projects that are not immediately vital. So if we had big plans, they're all going into weaponry.
Timing.
I don't know what to say about the number of people killed on our roads versus with weapons. Yeah, okay, fine. Very disappointing to hear. Anybody else though? No? Okay. In that case, I believe we reviewed and commented on the finance monitoring report. Next, oh, sorry, no, that was that's the finance monitoring report. Next, it's got the financial monitoring report for May 2026, which is also presented by Graham with Becky's support.
Thank you, Chair. This one will be quite brief, really, given the nature of the report this time of year. So this report provides the latest projections for this year's budget as of the end of May 2026. Across place and sustainability, there's an overall underspend projected of 1.834 million, excuse me. From this committee, however, there were no significant revenue variances to report, so there's no more detail for this particular period. As for capital, there are no updates to provide until the Strategy, Resource and Performance Committee complete the rebaselining exercise at their meeting in July. So at this stage, Chair, I've got nothing further to add. Of course, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was very quickly looking to see if I could find out what schemes were being scrapped by the government right now and whether any of them are for us. I think the likelihood of an A10 duelling has probably gone significantly down. Any comments on this report there? No? Okay. In that case, then, we've been asked to review and comment on the finance monitoring report. Well, I'm hoping we've reviewed it anyway. The final item on the committee's agenda is the agenda plan and appointments. Are there any comments or questions on the agenda plan from members or officers? No. Okay. Could the Democratic Services Officer Nick Mills take us through the appointment?
Thank you, Chair. Appointments to be made today are listed in Appendix 2 for outside bodies, Appendix 3 for internal groups, and Appendix 4 for member champions. And previous appointments will continue unless the committee agrees to change any of the ones listed in there. Just to know that the LHI panel members in the internal groups will pick that up and organise them and appoint them following the meeting using the executive director's delegation. And also, I'd just like to clarify that the non-motorised user champion is responsible for promoting the interests of all non-motorised users, including pedestrians, cyclists, equestrians and others, rather than just cyclists as suggested in the report. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Any members' comments on that? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dupre.
Just very briefly, the composition of the local highway improvement panels is the source of confusion, if not mystery, and I wondered whether we could be slightly clearer about that in future.
Thank you. We will take that away as to how to clarify it. I think there are some issues with members not having the sufficient time to be able to give to it. So therefore, trying to make sure those panels are fully staffed is sometimes challenging, but we would take that away. Okay, so members will be aware that there's a special meeting that's been arranged for the 28th of July. I'm hoping you will all be able to make that. That is about highway maintenance and our preventative plans and the highways, the changes in highway maintenance policies. Then following that, the next committee meeting is scheduled for the 1st of September 2026. But with that, thank you all for coming today. I'll draw the meeting to a close and I will see you all soon. Thank you.